Okay, so welcome everyone. I will call this meeting to order at 6:18 p.m. and start in a good way by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. These people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting for July 10th, 2023. Thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce the other elected members of Bowen Island's Council here this evening for folks who are new either online or joining us in person who may not know them. And I'll start on my far right here. We have Councillor Alex Jurgensen. His left, Councillor Sue Ellen Fast. To her left, Councillor Judy Getty. And on my far left, joining us live and in person is Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Lake. And his right is Councillor Allison Morris. We're also joined by members of our professional staff team here tonight, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, to my right, and our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insignia, to my left, and other staff who will be presenting agenda items here this evening. This meeting is being recorded. When members of the public speak during the public comment and the question and answer period of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent record, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as live streamed and recorded for posterity on our YouTube channel, which you can find on YouTube. This council meeting is an official forum for conducting the business of local government. We all love our community. We are passionate about what happens here. I'd encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and direct comments for council during the public comment and question and answer period to myself. For those of us that might not know, the agenda and full council package for this evening's meeting is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. With that, I will look to our corporate officer for any late items on our agenda.
Yes, there is an on-table items package circulated by email. That's in 6.2. There's a revised recommendation, and the recommendation should say 361 Cardina Road, not Cardina Road. In 6.2a, there is a additional letter from the public regarding the development variance permit for on Cardina Road. Item 12.8, there were a number of additional letters from the public regarding the proposed regional park.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda and late items. So moved by Councillor Jurgensen, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. 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 And that carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments. How many public comments do we have?
3 this evening.
Okay. So we have 3 public comments. Our commenters have the opportunity to take the full 3 minutes. The timer will be set for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So when you hear that, that 2 minute and 45 second alarm go off, that's your cue to really drive the point home. And I should probably add context. I think I'm going to start adding context to public comments because I've had some comments about this. Public comments are an opportunity for the public just to speak and be heard by council, which is why you don't see councillors really respond or engage in public comments. It's like we want to provide as much of a non-judgmental and safe space for our community who want to come deliver comments in front of council, which is why there's no like back and forth. If you want to do that, by all means, give me a call, give your council a call by email. We can do that with you one-on-one. All right. With that, our first public commenter is
Christy Grace.
Christy Grace. Ms. Grace, if you want to come join us up at the front, take a few seconds to get relaxed and ready. Your timer does not start until you speak.
So when do I start?
Anytime you're ready.
Lovely to be here, Mayor Leonard and council members. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Christy Grace Callister, longstanding community member of Bowen Island. I'm addressing the matter of overnight camping at the Metro Vancouver Regional Park, Chief Roger Curtis. Bowen Island has been our family's beloved home for 27 years. As an enduring member of the community, mother, and self-employed business owner on Bowen, my experiences have given me a broad, informed perspective of our island life. I signed the petition against camping at the park because I believe that the introduction of such a significant number of campsites with all its inherent complications will gradually erode and eventually obliterate the very essence of our island's ethos and ecological fabric as we currently know it. My primary concerns about moving forward with this proposed park plan include community impacts, infrastructure limitations, and potential safety risks. However, upon discovering an alternative vision that would uphold the integrity of our island community while promoting inclusivity, education, and sustainable tourism, I believe a balance can be achieved. This vision of balance is put forward through Ellen Hayakawa's concept of an eco-spiritual regional peace park, and I wholeheartedly endorse the proposal for Bowen Island. Ellen's regional peace park proposal has a focused intention of educating children to become stewards of the land in concert with nature. It represents a tangible, thoughtful, and practical win-win solution that promises balance and longevity. I firmly believe that with this educational container, the park's resources could be life-changing for participants while still celebrating and empowering Bowen Island's community and increasing ecological resilience in a changing environment. Allow me, please, to offer a tangible example. During my daughter Ashley Callister's childhood, she developed a passion for the environment through family and community experience, such as the years spent at Island Pacific School, and primarily her interactions with Bowen's incomparable natural resources. This passion led her to current professional role as the low carbon fuels lead at the BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy. Bowen's outdoor wonders played an instrumental role in nurturing her aspirations. In this regard, the eco-spiritual park could serve as a catalyst, igniting a similar passion within countless people who explore its wonders. They too could become the advocates for nature, or at the very least, revel in the joys of getting their hands in the soil as opposed to being captivated by their electronic devices. I recognize that the island is evolving, that change is necessary for growth. What I request is that the municipality consider the long-term impact of this evolution. At this pivotal moment, we have the ability to choose a direction that empowers our leaders to be leaders in sustainable tourism. Bowen Island is a unique ecosystem that requires a unique approach, and I am proud to support the integrated eco-spiritual concept that will uphold the island's integrity through the ongoing evolution long after we are here to advocate for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Next we have Larry Adams, and he is on Zoom.
Mr. Adams, are you there? Oh, we can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to address item 7.1 in your agenda. The proposed amendment to the subdivision and servicing bylaw to include a fee for inspection and administration of works. And I've sent a letter to you, which is in 7.1A in the agenda, so I don't need to repeat all that. Just wanted to underscore that with my personal presence and to also thank the planner for getting back to me on Friday with an email advising that they hadn't sort of taken into consideration works that would be well in advance of what probably would be the actual administration, processing, and inspection fees that the municipality incurs. So we're in support definitely of paying or covering the municipality's costs on that. But for works, as I noted in my letter, of $500,000, for instance, a $20,000 fee, which is 4% of $500,000, we think would be well in excess of what we've observed municipal staff to take in terms of time to process some of our subdivisions. So I just wanted to ask for some wording to be added to the proposed wording. That is for projects that are in excess of what the administration processing and inspection fees would be, that there be fairness on both parts. So that's hopefully clear, and thank you for the opportunity to address that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams.
We have Erica Olson.
Ms. Olson?
Hi. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me this evening. I just want to say I was very heartened when I listened to the committee of the whole meeting a couple of weeks ago when I heard, I'm speaking about the Cape Roger Curtis Park, when I heard about this council discuss the potential opportunity to develop a park for the future in an innovative way, establishing a vision and doing something unique, one that in a way that addresses not only the concerns of the Bowen community, but ones that address concerns that we face more globally as well. On that note, I was disappointed when I saw the proposed regional park at Cape Roger Curtis draft concept and program, the June 2023 document that Metro Vancouver provided, as I did not think that it deviated much from things that have been provided in the past. That it reflects a way of doing park design that is one that is outdated, does not come across as being innovative or using approaches that have been identified around the world as better for our future. It is not, also does not take into account the place-based characteristics of Cape Roger Curtis, the size of the place, given the number of campsites that it proposes, is inadequate, and ultimately also continues to not use the term adaptive management properly, despite that being pointed out at the committee of the whole meeting. I think that definitely needs to be changed. I was also, when I looked at the visitor use management plan, I was really hoping to see things like visitor projections and identification of carrying capacity. While it has management actions, they're very high level and they don't actually speak to things like management levers that Metro Vancouver could use to and employ to address concerns about impacts given the projections, and then end thresholds upon which different levers would be applied. These kinds of details are really important, I think, when thinking about a visitor use management plan. The traffic impact assessment was disappointing to see that there was anything provided on 2 days worth of data, especially when one of those days was when the ferry was canceled. Because trying to make inference on a data set like that is not robust statistically and does not reflect the actual traffic reality that is experienced throughout the summer. And I think it was on page 9, they talked about the cancellation of ferries that start at 3:30 p.m. So therefore, it could have caused a minimal impact on the level of traffic witnessed on the island during this Saturday peak. However, it is not deemed to be a significant issue for the intersections within the Eastern Study Network. So I think that sort of minimizing the impact of that ferry cancellation doesn't recognize the fact that there are people who knew that there was potentially a ferry cancellation, who would have altered their plans. And they found that the peak hour was midday, which also doesn't recognize the fact that when you have a data set where there's less traffic later in the day, potentially because of a ferry cancellation, you are going to find that there is a peak earlier in the day. And so you're making a circular reference there, which is not proper study technique. And so it's making inadequate inferences based on this data. And that all of this to say it doesn't build a lot of trust within the community about the kind of work that they're doing to produce information, and just speaks to wanting to do things quickly and not correctly. And also just to point out in the study how it forecasts traffic based on the proportional way that people travel to Crippen from the ferry, which assumes 21% of people will walk, which I think is really unrealistic, that 21% of people are going to walk to see Cape from the ferry, and definitely underestimates traffic. And even with these underestimates, they still forecast an increase of about 27 to 30% of traffic along Tunstall and Whitesales, which is well above the limits of acceptable change given the nature of the neighborhood. And
final thought.
And then my final thought is I would just like to shift attention. I know I was talking a lot about the information that was provided. I do really want to shift attention towards solutions and highlight the proposal that Ellen has put forth for its innovative characteristics. And I'm really interested in continuing conversation about a vision forward. And I'd like to encourage council to work with those of us in the community, but also work with Metro Vancouver to really find a new vision, one that's not the one that's been proposed, one that's more aligned with the one Ellen has proposed, one that's based on the social and ecological characteristics of the place, is supported by the surrounding community, has the consent of the emergency service departments on this island, and is co-developed with the Squamish Nation. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our commenters tonight. I know it takes something to come to the hall or even be online at 6:15 when we've got a gorgeous evening like we do outside on a Bowen summer. So thank you for your passion and care for the community. Moving on to item 3, the consent agenda. Are there councillors who would like to remove items from the consent agenda? Councillor Morse?
Sorry, just check there. I got 3.4.
3.4. Okay, any other councillors wishing to remove items from the consent agenda?
I'm quite happy to have it discussed after the delegation.
Okay. So let's deal with that first. So item 3.4 has been removed from the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt the rest of the consent agenda? Councillor Jurgensen moves it, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. So item 3.4 is the award contract design of the Carter Road Bridge replacement. I'll look to Councillor Morris for your introductory comments.
I raised the, I've pulled it because the work description doesn't describe, it looks like a carte blanche for the designer to design any size bridge they want. So I'm just wanting clarification that it's to be a bridge that's not really any wider than the existing bridge. And for weight, is it to take the largest fire truck we've got or just a normal fire truck? The largest fire truck would be the water tanker, I would think. I'm not sure if the new one weighs. So it's just, I was just a little concerned about it, sort of just was too open-ended for what the, for my comfort in just saying, design a new bridge.
Right. And we end up with a Port Man.
Yeah.
So I see our Director of Engineering has stealthily made his way to the commenting table here, so I will look to him for an answer.
Sure. So we did provide the basic parameters in the RFP indicating that we're looking for a 4.5 meter wide, 16 meter span bridge, which is the existing characteristics. There is a preliminary design phase that the consultant team will be going through with us to confirm all the basic parameters. If there's a reason why it should be a little wider, a little longer for site considerations, then that can be accommodated. But basically, we're looking for something that is essentially the same size as what's there, but a lot more robust. And yes, that would be able to handle our largest fire truck, which is 30,000 kilograms gross vehicle weight. So there are design codes for highway bridges that the consultant team we'd be hiring are very familiar with and would be following. And so we would essentially be relying on them to confirm the loading. we would ensure that the loading would be, at a minimum, enough to accommodate our 30,000 kilogram largest fire truck vehicle, which would be the largest vehicle we would have crossing that bridge.
Okay. I read the attachment in the report and I couldn't see anything that the information on just what the bridge design parameters were going to be. So that's why I asked the question. Okay, thank you. So phase one will be looked at and they won't get into phase two until phase one is had. So it would come back to council if there's to be anything other than which is the same size as the existing one with better weight.
If there's some reason that a 2-lane bridge is what we want to design and build, then that would be a major change. That would be reflected in the cost and would have to come back to council.
Thank you. I'll move that council award request for proposals BIM RFP 2023-010 for design of Carter Road Bridge replacement to All North Consultants Limited for an amount not to exceed $73,120.
Second by Councillor Wake. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to item 5, delegations. We have Ellen Hayek-Powell regarding the Bylaw Eco Spiritual Regional Peace Park, restoring, regenerating, and rewilding. Some great alliteration, nature for present and future generations. Thank you for being here.
Okay, I'm going to try on the table. Oh. Good evening, Mayor Leonard and Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about the proposal method on Eco Spiritual Regional Peace Park, restoring, regenerating, and rewilding nature. To give you an update, the proposal's been sent to the planning staff at Metro Vancouver and the Regional Parks Committee, where I spoke this past Wednesday, July 7th. It's also appeared in the newspaper and social media and in our community, where there's growing support for it from individuals and associations, as evidenced by letters sent to Mayor and Council. To summarize the vision, the regional park at the Cape would focus on connecting people from the region with nature in deeper, more immersive outdoor experiential education. During the school year from September to May, these programs would be focused on children and youth. Experiencing awe and wonder in nature combined with education would provide them with spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical experiences, knowledge, and tools that they as leaders of tomorrow will need to change the destructive path we're on. The goal would be to help them make decisions to create a lifestyle with the smallest ecological footprint. In order to rewild as much land as possible, all human infrastructure is minimized, and therefore there are only 2 group campsites, or perhaps big houses, each holding 40 people, clustered on 1 to 2 of the current lots, which would be used in the summer by groups of all ages. There are also practical suggestions in the vision for transportation that will minimize further destruction of nature, such as constructing additional roads in the park or on the island. I'd like to clarify one question that's been coming up. Why use the word eco-spiritual? I think that these days most would agree that we're made up of mind, body, spirit, and emotions. The word spiritual is not attached to any religion, although many religions do acknowledge an innate spiritual connection to nature. Physics has shown that energy is contained in every atom, living or so-called non-living. You can equate spirit to energy. the spirit or energy of a person, the spirit or energy of a community, the spirit or energy of an animal, a tree, a rock, or water. Eco-spiritual means humans, because we are part of nature, developing a spiritual connection to all of nature, with the eco derived from the Greek meaning home or household. So developing a spiritual connection to our home, which is planet Earth. For humans to have caused so much destruction in the last 200 years means that we are spiritually and emotionally disconnected from nature, which is the source of everything that keeps us alive: oxygen, food, and shelter. The other creatures on this planet are not ignoring the natural laws and cycles of nature as we are. They're consuming only what they need to live. To provide a new solution that will change our human way of behaving in our materially privileged island and region, we need new ways of thinking and being, consuming only what we need and living within an ecological footprint in balance with nature and the rest of humanity. I believe that Squamish Nation, whose land we're on, and the people in our community who know and love the land and waters of the Cape know what's best and have ideas in terms of visioning and collaboratively planning with Metro Vancouver for implementation. And possibly because of that, people in our community have spoken against the 100 campsites sprawled in 3 separate sites across the land. Quite a number of people with whom I've spoken have said that although they signed the petition with 100 campsites and continue to stand for that, they would fully support this vision in principle because they love the emphasis on education, especially for children and youth, the group camping or housing in a big house and the cluster on the 1 to 2 lots. And to be clear, on weekends and in the summer, that infrastructure would be used for people of all ages. If anything, I believe that the mayors in the region will find that more of their constituents are actually served more equitably by serving children and youth, some of whom who have families who can't afford to camp or don't have time to bring their children for nature immersion. How inspiring to have more land to rewild, protect, and connect to over the coming decades. The current proposed plan for the park by Metro Vancouver in the agenda package includes 24 of the 100 campsites being placed in the coastal zone near Hussar Lane. I ask, why should only those camping have the privilege of one of the most spectacular views of the ocean, the city, and looking northward to the Wild Coast Refuge? I'm also wondering if anyone has thought of the safety of the children in the campground where there have been rock slides on the edge of the road from the unstable cliff, and where there are extremely steep blue cliffs that go into the ocean. Everyone should have equal access to that very incredible view of the sparkling waters, sometimes alive with whales and dolphins and sea lions, without that view being obstructed by tents, park infrastructure, and human activity. Anyone in our community who has spent time in that location understands that it is a place of sacred silence to hear and observe nature. Although this vision is just starting to make the rounds of this community, I haven't met a person in our community who has said that they wouldn't be able to support the principles of the vision, not necessarily the details, which I would hope other people would flesh out. So some of the principles: working collaboratively with Squamish Nation as allies with their vision for the land and revival of their culture, empowering people of all ages and especially children and youth to make wiser decisions to live in alignment and peace with nature's laws, including, and that's why I called it Peace Park, to make peace, including learning to give back to nature, minimizing and clustering new human infrastructure of the park on the land and on this island, and honoring the spirit of the land and really the waters as well by regenerating and rewilding as much of the land and water as possible, and having the park visitors play an active role in the process, not just be bystanders. An environmentally conscious design and utilization of the park aligns harmoniously with the ethos of our island community. Through deeper listening and fostering collaboration and cooperation between nature, Squamish Nation, our community, our mayor and council and staff, Metro Vancouver staff, Parks Committee and Board, the Nekleleham Eco-Spiritual Regional Peace Park will serve as an exemplary model for future parks. Its legacy will be one of hope, inspiration, healing, peace, and harmony. benefiting present and future generations. Thank you for listening and your consideration. I'll now take questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Councillor Wick?
Thank you, and thank you for all you've obviously put a huge amount of work into this, so and kudos to you for bringing forth an alternative, which seems to be gaining a little more agreement and support amongst our community. My question is, what kinds of organizations or groups do you see utilizing this approach? And how do we ensure that the people that they're bringing are going to actually engage in the way that you described?
Yeah, one of the organizations that I mentioned in the proposal, which unfortunately I can't remember the name, but it's sort of Connect, Teach and Sustain. And it's a group that's run by youth. I met their executive director actually when I spoke at the Regional Parks Committee, and she gave me her business card. And I said, oh, I mentioned your organization in the proposal. So they currently use regional parks for camping, and they're actually connected to Metro Vancouver Foundation. And I know that at the first, I think it was the first COW meeting, Jeff Fitzpatrick told me that, or actually it was one of the consultations, he said that there are some very moving stories about them using the parks. And I think there are also groups like guides and scouts and certainly with children and youth. You know, I was thinking of maybe one day for grade 3s and an overnight for grade 4s and a 5-day for grade 8s, and then in high school, 7-day, possibly with some sort of a vision quest or some sort of initiation for youth. And the supervision there, usually, and why I said 30 or 40, capacity for 40 is because I was just assuming 30 students and then 10 supervisors, which I think is approximately normal. So there you've got whatever, one supervisor for every 3 students actually. So parents, teachers, and other educators. And I'm sure there's many other groups. I did mention, and that was based on research that I did, that there's an Indigenous society. And they serve, I think it's 5 of the cities within the region. It was my 10-minute time. So I did mention them in the proposal as well, because I think that it sort of drew from many different cities, but would also serve the needs of Indigenous nations who are looking also for their children to camp on the land. And we've heard that from Skohomish Nation as well. And so I just believe that the kinds of groups that would be attracted would be wanting to do something other than what I would call purely pleasure camping. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, but there are other parks in the region and there are provincial parks that actually serve those needs. And I really believe we need new models.
Any further questions, Councillor Morse?
Thanks for your presentation, Alan. I'll have to object to your comment about only residents of Bowen Island being able to bring a car on the ferry. In that situation, my family would never come to visit me because they can't get there, or relatives or whatever. So I can't support that part at all. But thank you for the rest of it because it's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, I think that the ideas were put out just as ideas. I mean, I think the vision is a holistic vision. And I wanted to provide some information on transportation that I've seen. In this case, it was in Iona in Scotland, and it's worked very well for them since the 70s. They're not really, they are a different island because they're mainly sheep crofters there, and their population has dropped since the 70s, I think. So maybe there's 177 sheep crofters instead of
333 or something like that. But it's worked really well there. And I visited that place and they were hosting, when I visited in the 90s, over 250,000 people a year. And it was not touristy. One of the things it wasn't a tourist trap. And people walked. They walked on the land. And so I don't know if there's some sort of, modification. I, again, think that if we put our brains together, that somehow we would think of the right angle for this, if in fact, how can we accommodate people? So, I think it's great that you brought that up. So now you've given us something to think about.
So a couple of curiosities I have. The first is, so our municipality, we don't get to set the operational nature of the park or change the vision. That's a Metro Vancouver rule. So I'm curious, based on some of the letters that I'm starting to see go out, both to our council as well as to the Metro Vancouver folks. Have you gotten anything back from them, and what's been the?
I guess I spoke to Jeff a couple of weeks ago, so I sent the proposal into staff, and then I followed up with that. And he said that, I think you'll see a lot of ideas that your kind of ideas, and he wasn't specifically referring, but he was saying that we're in the proposal, and I'm sure other people have written them in, but in our next consultation. But that was about it. And I think I talked to one person. There was a suggestion that maybe if it did come from our mayor and council, that would be, that would give it sort of more, I don't know what, credibility, especially if the island's behind it. And I still think that the bottom line is that for the mayors and the councillors, whether they're on the committee or the Parks Committee or the board, it's about seeing how this benefits their constituents. That to me is the bottom line. I don't think it's about 100 campsites. I actually believe if the numbers were done on this proposal, I don't want to do the numbers because I don't know, I don't think it's my job. But I think if we were to look at it, they're proposing that their main season would be May to October, September, and this is the summer season. That's classic in a park. I'm proposing, and I still think the land needs to rest in between, by the way. I don't think there should be just constant traffic up there. I don't know. I don't know much about the park management side of it, really. But I think if we looked at it, that there may be a greater number of constituents served. And as I said, the equity is important because, I heard, I think from previous council, from someone, I think Metro Van wants to provide camping for those who might not be able to afford to come and stay in an Airbnb here on the island, which I now hear are $300 a night or $600 for the house or something like that. But I actually think that that's kind of almost like a privileged attitude. It actually didn't make me feel good. What exactly are you saying by that? That poor people camp? And I'm saying that some people, some families cannot afford to even buy camping gear or to rent it or to, come out to the land. Whereas this proposal actually allows everybody, the kids especially, for them to have exposure to nature, whereas they may never get to come. They'll have to just be in the city. And I think that in this day and age, we have to be thinking about those particular issues and not come from our own, privilege, because we live on this island, so there's something about this, because you never know who's going to become a biologist or whatever else. My family wouldn't have been able to afford to buy the camping equipment plus everything else. I was lucky. We went to conservation area, but the outdoor experiences definitely influenced my trajectory as a child environmentalist, as an activist, and also to become a wildlife biologist. So I really believe that, again, if we can show, and it really is show, that this is going to serve the mayors, the constituents, that it's totally worth the fact that they are putting money into this park and that their constituents will have every opportunity to visit, that why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? The first cut was just an idea. Let's put 100 campsites on there and that'll give us, you know, whatever, our money back. I don't know how that's, what the view on that is. But I think there's just some more, we have to slow down, because evolution happens over billions of years, as we know. And the goal for this is to regenerate old growth forest on this island and at the Cape, and that's going to take 500 to 1,000 years. I think thinking 2050 is way too short. That's when we get into dumb planning. We have to think longer, broader, bigger, deeper, more expansively, so that we can actually plan. And you cannot plan without a vision. This is a vision. It's not just a set of ideas. It's actually a vision if you look at it. And without vision, you can't plan infrastructure. And why would you go spending money on things that you don't really have to? I think this may, in the end, save time, energy, and money. And it's a huge investment in people, which actually kind of needs to happen now so that we don't have the same mistakes that we're made by the younger people.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah,
Councillor Saunders?
it's not a question, it's just a comment. I sent this to all of us several weeks ago, and I was actually over walking in Ireland when I got it, and I read it and thought, what a freaking great idea. So like, I just want to say thank you for presenting some new options and taking the trouble the effort that you did to put it together. So, and it's gonna require serious consideration, not just by this table, but by Metro as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Jurgensen?
I just want to follow up on Councillor Saunders right there and just thank you for all the work that you've put into this.
Further comments or questions? Thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 6.1, consideration of temporary use permit TUP 2023-0066, 511 Sunset Road. Daniel Martin, our manager of planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me just start my screen. Apologies, I have too many presentations open. Okay. That's okay. As the mayor said, I'm here to present a TUP for consideration at 511 Road. So this was introduced at your June 9th meeting, and this TUP is to permit the garden center use on the property at 511 Sunset, restricted to the retail sale of nursery plants, home gardening supplies, and related goods and services. There would be conditions on the TUP, including conditions about water storage and metering, and conditions to support Vancouver Coastal Health's conditions for the water system. So this, as I said, this application was submitted in April, conducted internal review. We gave notice before the council introduction in June. Public notice has again taken place between now and then, this July 10th meeting. At the introduction, we presented the letters received. So 41 letters received, 39 supported and 2 with concerns. And then of the letters identified within the mail out radius, 3 in support and 1 opposed. And no additional letters were received since that application introduction in early June. So the recommendation is that council issue the TUP 2023-0066 for the garden center use at 511 Sunset Road. Thank you.
Maybe for this one, we could get the recommendation on the table and then discuss it from there.
Move the recommendation that council issue temporary use permit TUP 2023-066 for garden center use of 511 Sunset Road, legally described as Lot 1, Block C, District Lot 492, Group 1, New Westminster District Plan, PCP 18926, PID 026538646.
Seconded by Councillor Jurgensen.
35.
PID 026358.
646.
Okay, any objection to amending that PID 358?
You just misread it.
Seeing none, that is adopted. So it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Getty?
I have a question. The only issue that came up that I took note of in the discussion was the issue of pesticides, and that because the TUP goes with the land and they're, it's like I don't have any problem with the current owner, but there might be somebody else. So when I look at general terms and conditions, your page 3 of 8, number 2 says nothing in this permit shall in any way relieve the developer's obligation to ensure development proposal complies in every way with the statutes, regulations, requirements, covenants, easements, right-of-ways, and licenses applicable to the undertaking. Does that cover the pesticides that are banned or the ones that are allowed on Bowen and herbicides?
It would include those prohibitions in that bylaw. The bylaw is about the application of pesticides. And so it wouldn't necessarily prohibit the sale of the pesticides because it is permitted on some land uses on Bowen. I think our pesticide bylaw prohibits it in certain residential land, but not commercial land is my recollection. And so the garden center would be permitted the sale of the pesticides.
And not use.
Councillor Fast?
Thank you. That was my same question. I'm looking at number 6 here on page 2, where it says no chemical or pesticide is used in the garden area between the lane and the cistern shed. But as I understand it, our pesticide use control bylaw does allow, in some cases on commercial properties, like for rats or, things where there's health, not just aesthetic issues. So my question was, between the lane and the cistern shed, is that no chemical or pesticide is used? Between the lane and the cistern shed, that is the main garden sale of plants area, is it? But it doesn't include the parking lot.
No, so that is specific. That's one of the conditions that was requested from Vancouver Coastal Health and relates to the water system on the property. And so not wanting pesticide use within a radius of the water system that's used both for this property and the neighboring property, both for residential and commercial use.
Thank you. Okay, great. And does that include the water collection, water catchment system in 4B right above? That's the, I take it, rooftop?
Yeah, that water system could be combined with the water system or would be a separate water storage from rainwater catchment for use for watering, but not for potable water use.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Saunders?
This may be something that happens at the other end, not at this end, but my only concern with this would be there are areas of Vancouver, one for sure that I know from 16th north to the water and I don't know, I think from Main Street to Cambry or something where there's a particular, I think it's a Japanese beetle or something, and you can't actually take a plant from there and put it anywhere else in the city, never mind Bowen Island. What are the I don't know if there's other areas like that, there may be, but what are the protections that something, against that? Or is that something it's at the other end, you get protected, the buyer is supposed to know that?
Like protection about importing
stuff that we don't want imported, from the mainland.
Yeah.
Like you're not, the bylaw there is you can't export it without the province dry rooting everything and checking it, basically every single plant. So it's covered at that end, but there's no control at this end to see where things are coming from, I guess. And I don't know if that's even our place to do that. I'm just raising the question.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any regulations that we have about that beyond whatever is like provincially applicable.
Okay. I guess, we rely on the buyer here to know the rules.
Garcia?
The municipality does do a fair bit of education around minimizing invasive plants and the introduction of those plants. And we actually have a lovely poster board in the lobby set up right now, just put up last week, I think, that shows what some of those invasive plants are and what some native species are that we would encourage. But, the majority of kind of regulatory control is at the provincial level in terms of the introduction of species, and so we can try to promote and educate around that as much as possible.
I'm going to go first-time speakers first. Councillor Morse.
Just thinking when questions are being raised, if this is a temporary use permit, so we can put conditions in, so could we put a condition in that invasive plants not be sold at the center?
Through the chair, that could be a condition. I think I would just want to look to sort of specific language around invasive species. But yes, it could be a condition on the TUP.
That's fast.
Thank you. And these are great questions from Carla, tell me if I'm wrong, but from the invasive species animal type things, that's under the Wildlife Act and there are rules about that. And hopefully nobody brings bullfrogs or, bad kinds of invasive species to Bowen and releases them. In terms of insects, like the Japanese beetle, that's a provincial program, and they would actually, the province, I think, has the ability to come and say, no, nothing can move from here, and they can shut down parts of any activity, including commercial, that would be doing that. And in terms of plant species, that is extremely difficult, except for noxious weeds, which the province has designated as bad, and they could even come and spray them on your property if they needed to. But it's an extremely difficult one. Besides the education that's because any plant can turn out to be invasive almost in our climate. And I think Claudia Schaefer's done a lot of, in the most recent gold pages, I believe is that where that is, Carla? Anyway, there are many resources on Bowen about invasive species, and call Carla if you want to know more, or I'll find out too. But I think it would be really onerous to put a condition in for invasive species to a business like this, who's all horticultural businesses are trying to do the best thing, and then they don't want to help people wreck their gardens. And they're, I think it would be really difficult because the lists change all the time. There's an invasive species council of BC and all that kind of thing, but the situation's always changing, especially with climate change and that kind of thing. So I'm not familiar with any conditions that could go on a permit like that.
Any
Not that I
further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Item 6.2, consideration of development variance permit DVP 2023-0078 for 361 Cardina Road. Once again, to our manager of planning and development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as the mayor said, here to present a DVP for your consideration at 361 Cardinal Road. This was introduced to your June 12th council meeting, and this is for a reduced front yard setback for an above ground pool at the location. So it would be to reduce the front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 0.6 meters to permit this pool. In terms of responses to notice, we've received 5 letters of support from properties within the mail-out notice and 1 letter of support from outside the mail-out notice, and as well as 1 letter opposed outside that notice area. But other than that, there's no further update on this DVP, and the staff recommendation is to issue the DVP, vary the front lot lines.
Thank you. Maybe I will again look for a motion to be on the floor first. Councillor Jurgensen.
I move.
Okay, so Councillor Jurgensen moves the motion as recommended. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Getty?
To the planner, the 1 letter in opposition was concerned about the water quality. And I believe that at the first, when this was first presented and the proponents were here, they said that it was going to be salt water. So that is different from what the opposition was about, right? They were talking about chemicals and I think it was level of chlorine. It might have been bromine, but that was not what was proposed by the proponents.
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. I mean, I would imagine there's still some chemicals within that, but fewer than a sort of traditional.
Any other questions or debate? Councillor Fast?
Just to say, this is usually the kind of thing that I don't like to see, but for this particular one, seeing as how it's only going to be sunk into the ground, I think it's 1 meter and immersed into the ground by approximately 1 meter. And, you know, it's a steel tank. I think that it could be removed at a future time if needed. It's not like a as permanent or as significant a structure as some that have been permitted for variance of a front lot line. That's a small front lot line, but I don't object to this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I guess I just have one question, and it's super basic. So it's a significant reduction in setback. I guess what is the intention of that setback? And then with the recommendation coming from staff to approve it, what's the rationale for providing that?
I think it's a good question. Like the front yard setback, one is sort of visibility and conformity across the neighborhood. It's about, to some extent, setbacks are about sort of protection of privacy and visual privacy from neighbors. We have a setback from the road, which is about sort of visibility from it. So within, this is an extensive reduction within the setback that we sort of were challenged with. Some of it is looking at the overall site and knowing where are alternatives and what is possible. I'll say in general, like on Bowen, the majority of lots have the same setbacks, and lots on Bowen have gone through, very different subdivision histories, development histories. So, lots we see in modern subdivisions often feel very different than historic ones where they may have done like a grid pattern on land that's not at all regular. So it can often be challenging with our sort of standard setbacks and then different thing. In cases like this, where it's sort of a small building significantly within the setback, one of the key things we are looking to is neighborhood responses, thinking that in the different neighborhoods are very different. And if, there's significant support from neighbors, that can be a sort of an overriding factor, or at least a significant factor of knowing that they know sort of what is in their neighborhood, what the historic non-conforming things are, what the neighborhood feel is like, and can help judge, does this fit with sort of how they view their neighborhood?
Thank you. That's super helpful. To our CAO, then Councillor Dickinson.
And adding to what the planner was saying, and Planner Martin, please correct me if I've got this wrong, but I also seem to recall that part of the reason for the really minimal setback was to ensure that there's no impact on the septic field on the site.
On this, yeah.
But to be able to accommodate having the pool in that portion of the yard rather than on the seaside of the yard.
Right. Councillor Dickinson?
I just wanted to ask the chair to the planner, I assume also one of the reasons why a setback is being permitted, setback reduction is being permitted here is because it's not a building that's being built up to that point, rather it's a pool. So it's a little bit different.
Through the chair, I mean, that's correct, and then it has a lower impact, which would be something we would be sort of evaluating.
Further questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Coming back up, Mr. Martin, who's on quadruple play here tonight, I think. 7.1, amendment to the planning fees and bylaw and building bylaw. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I am here today with bylaws to amend our building bylaw, development fees bylaw, and our subdivision servicing bylaw, all seeking amendments to the fee structures in those bylaws. And so I presented some of this to you in January of this year, but just by way of background, we have a policy in the municipality about the guiding principles for planning and budgeting decision-making. And so it lays out that fees and charges are reviewed to ensure that services are maintained, and that fees for development-related functions will be set at levels to recover full costs. When I presented in January, I also went through sort of the difference of fees to taxes, and the goals are for fees is to recover costs and not to be sort of independent revenue sources for a municipality. They should be tied to the service that they're providing. And so when I came in January, council referred my report to the Finance Advisory Committee and directed staff to draft amendment bylaws. And so went to the FAC in, I believe, February of this year. And the FAC moved the whereas being the policy 8.0 and 8.1 that I just showed, quoted extensively from that policy, and then resolved that the FAC requests council direct staff in the FAC to review municipal fees to ensure that the principles are being followed, including full cost accounting. So then, as you see in the report, staff recommending primarily the similar fees as we presented in January. There's been a couple of changes. And so sort of initially off the bat, the reason for the large delay in terms of going to the FAC in February and coming before you in July was that we've been in the process of implementing an e-permitting system for our building permits. And one of the big challenges through that has been having the system work with our building permit fees as the implemented in our bylaw in terms of a building permit application fee, which is currently $75, which is then deducted from the building permit fee. And for whatever reason, it has been extremely challenging. So staff are sort of working with that. And then the feedback from the FAC meeting, which were concerned that our fees were not adequately covering costs. And in particular, our building permit fees were not adequately covering costs. And Some of that was based on comparison from neighboring communities or looking at the historic fees over time and the ratio of fees to department revenue. So what's before you today in terms of amendments to the building bylaw is changing the building permit fee. So one, increase in the amount of that building permit application fee. So one is increasing that application fee amount, and that's been a goal of staff for a while, seeing a number of projects where people have paid the building permit application fee, which is currently $75. Going through all of the work of staff of reviewing that building permit application, which is quite significant. And then when it comes time to the building permit ready and the full fee to be paid, the applicants will walk away from the application and say, oh, we now have, construction costing, it's cost too much, we don't want to proceed. And so staff feel like we've spent all this time reviewing your application, we could have been reviewing somebody else's application. And so looking to increase that application fee to better cover the costs of reviewing the application. But couple that with the change to the e-permitting, what we're looking at doing is having that amount not be deducted from the total building permit fee. So a fee of $75 that's deducted from the building permit to a fee of $150 that's not deductible. But then the third change that's on this table, the building permit fees. Currently, the way the building permit fees work is they're based on construction value and would continue to be based on construction value. But currently, the first $1,000 of construction value is valued at $75. So if you were constructing a project that was $1,000 in construction value, you would pay a $75 application fee, and then you wouldn't pay anything because you would have that deducted from your first $1,000 construction value. And we would instead move it so it's just $9 per thousand in construction value from the word go. So if you were the $1,000, you would pay the application fee and you would pay $9 additional dollars. So increasing the application fee, doubling it, but then not sort of further increasing the amount, if that makes sense. But then looking to increase the threshold for where it's $9 per thousand up to $150,000, up from $100,000. And that's just sort of tracking the increase in construction costs over time so that we're capturing a slightly higher amount for projects. And then the other change is more straightforward in that we have an interim occupancy fee of $200. And what we would look to do is increase the amount for renewals of that interim occupancy to $300. So trying to help guide people's behavior in terms of issuing interim occupancy as a short-term measure. If the building is safe, but certain paperwork or other requirements aren't done. And so trying to encourage people to complete those and get onto a full occupancy permit. The second bylaw is changes to our development fees bylaw. And so the first change would be to include a surcharge for permit applications when the work is underway. And so put in a 50% surcharge on the application. So this is one in recognition of the fact that it is actually significantly more work doing the retroactive permits than when the work hasn't been done. And second, to guide behavior to make it clear that your goal is to apply for your permit before you start the work. The next one is to include a fee for referrals from the LCRB, the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch. So council is aware of that policy that when we receive an application, we bring it to council and then we gather public input and do analysis and bring it back to council. And so we're trying to include a fee for that work. And then the third one is that the development fees bylaw lists an administration fee that's not refundable when an application is withdrawn. So if somebody withdraws the application, we refund the fee, but there's an administration fee that's not refundable. And it's currently set at $50 for permits and $100 for rezonings. And we'd look to increase that to $100 for permits or $250 for rezonings. Again, in recognition of the fact that significant staff work can go into initial intake, initial review. Often it's like initial site visit and referrals of a permit. And then if staff at that point indicate, not likely to support, and somebody withdraws, that significant work has gone into it up to that point. And then the third is in our subdivision servicing bylaw. So the subdivision servicing bylaw has a template for a works and services agreement, and that's an agreement that we enter into with a developer when a developer is conducting a subdivision and is not completing the work before coming for final subdivision. Instead, they are completing the subdivision while there is still outstanding work. And to do that, we have this template agreement. And so what the applicant would have to do is provide engineering drawings of the work to be done, engineering cost estimates of the work to be done. They provide a deposit of 125% of the value that can be drawn down as the works are completed. Currently, that template in our bylaw does not include a fee for administration and inspection of the works. But what I've put here is that in the past 8 years that I've been here, we've entered into 4 of these agreements, and that fee has been included in 2 out of the 4 of the agreements. And so we're looking to include it in the templates that we're consistently applying it going forward. And then you've heard tonight and seen the letter in the agenda from one individual pointing out that at the higher values that fee can greatly exceed the cost of what we're actually doing. And I would agree with that sentiment. And so I have revised the bylaw that's before you. I revised it in the late items on Friday to be clear that it's 4% of the value of works for projects up to a certain value of $200,000. And beyond that, it's at a rate to cover anticipated costs of administration inspection of the work. So to be clear that this is to cover the costs and to consistently apply it, but not intended as sort of a cash,
Revenue.
Yeah, that it's not revenue, it's to cover costs and it's not like windfall revenue. So the staff recommendation is to give each of these bylaws, 606, 607, and 610, 3 readings. And the goal for that is then to be adopted at the July 24th meeting, but with a date in the bylaw they come into effect September 1st, so that staff have a chance to update information and have a clear date of when the fee is starting to be charged. So thank you.
Thank you for that presentation and the report. It was really well detailed and well done. I see some hands up right away, so this one will open discussion first. So I'll let the Councillor Getty, Saunders, and then Morse.
To the planner, Mr. Martin, we've had a little bit of email correspondence on table number 1 in your first report. So when you're referring to the refundable amount in bylaw 607, in one of the slides that you had just put up, I think the confusion, when you go back to that one, it's a non-refundable amount, isn't it? Administrative fee that's not refundable when an application is withdrawn.
Correct.
So there's a problem possibly with the headings in that table. If we can take away the whole issue of fees, because it's a deposit that may or may not be, I suppose it could be called the administration fee, but on this table, I think that anybody that is coming in and looking at it could become as possibly, I mean, they're in the business, so they know it better than I do, but I find it very confusing. So it's a non-refundable amount that the table is calling a refundable amount. Is that correct?
Through the chair, so yeah, after our communication, attempted to clarify it in this, that that the bylaw itself calls it an administration fee that's not refundable. Application is withdrawn. So I tried to use this language in this presentation to be clear that essentially you pay the application fee and then decided to withdraw. That's the amount that we would not refund you. We would withhold refunding that amount and say that's the administration fee, you're paying that regardless. But if you want to withdraw the balance of the fee, we would refund to you when you withdraw your application.
Say that again, sorry.
So the amount specified is what's identified in the bylaw as an administration fee.
Yes.
That's not refunded when an application is withdrawn. So if somebody submits an application and then down the road they say, actually, I'm not going to proceed with this application, I want to withdraw and I want my fee refunded. The administration fee is the amount that we do not refund them when they withdraw their application.
Okay. So when they withdraw the application, they're not going to be refunded now $50 or $100,
Yeah.
and in the future $100 or $200. Okay. So then, if we look at this table, when it's that number is 607, right? Under development refundable amount.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we need to change that.
In bylaw 606?
607.
Okay.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
All right.
Third column over,
Under
from
fee.
the left, it says under fee. By 607, it says refundable amount. It just should be non.
Right. Okay.
Article 7 is the liquor and cannabis one.
That's above. This one line down.
Thank you.
So in the table, the bylaw itself is correctly identified in terms of its increase in the administration fee. But yes, the table should say non-refundable.
Anything else, Councillor Getty?
No, thank you.
Councillor Saunders?
Thank you. To the chair, two brief questions. First, is the 4%, I'm looking at 610 here, is the 4%, is that a typical number? Or is that like what we would find in most municipalities?
Through the chair, there is a range, but it seems to be roughly.
The only other kind of tied to that is I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile to put in there. I can see that your revised section 25 addressed Mr. Adams' concerns, and it all makes sense the way you explained it. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't have something there that says to cover costs, but not less than $8,000, or is it always going to be $8,000 or more on a larger project? I mean, I would be disappointed if I had a $200,000 or $150,000 project and you had a $300,000 project and I paid more fees because the covering cost was less than my 4%.
Right, through the chair, I see the concern. I think that in practice, given that it sort of enshrines a 4% fee or 4% of the cost up to 200,000, but it's sort of a marking anyways of like, that's what the fee is, but then we can talk about if it should be less based on estimated costs.
I guess if you're satisfied that, if staff is satisfied that you're always going to recover costs, even without saying that, then that's fine, because as you said, it's not supposed to be a windfall. But I'm just concerned that there might be an inequity there.
Understood. Anything else, Councillor Saunders? Councillor Morris?
So I'm in bylaw 610, and that very last paragraph, which maybe what Councillor Saunders was talking about. The owner covenants and agrees to pay the municipality a non-refundable fee in the amount of, and is it always going to be 4% of 200,000?
Up to. If for works that exceed 200,000, the fee is to cover.
Okay, well, something's got to go in that blank. And the way the brackets read, it's 4% of the estimated cost of the works, where the estimated cost is less than 200,000. So if the works were only 100,000, then you'd only bill them 4,000 for whatever.
Through the chair, that's correct. And in essence, these agreements, when they're prepared, the square brackets is removed and it just says the cost is whatever it would be. It would be we would write in $4,000 and it wouldn't have to put in the square brackets.
And for something that's 300,000, what's going to go in there? 4% of 300,000?
I think then what's contemplated is that, we would have to do some work to estimate the actual cost of that, that work, with the assumption being that it would be more than, if it was 200,000, like that it has to be some way tied to source, but that it wouldn't increase at a 4% rate forever because at some rate it doesn't cost more for us to.
So it's all going to get sorted out in negotiating the agreement.
Yeah, my experience with these agreements is they are quite lengthy. That's part of why we've often encouraged and developers actually sometimes prefer non-entry into them. So the majority of subdivisions in Bowen don't have works and service agreements.
And then my question that I had emailed you about was the Public Works goes out to inspect the road in one where the applicants built the road. And it's just that $250 fee that was in 2.3 of the previous bylaw.
Through the chair, and correct in terms of correct, there's a subdivision application fee and a fee per lot as part of the application, and then there's a final inspection fee per lot, time of final subdivision.
Final inspection fee is so much per lot.
Yeah.
Okay, plus the original fee just to apply.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Further comments or questions? Councillor Fast?
My comment is just that I'm happy to see the things I wanted to follow up on from the meeting in January are here. I'd be happy to move the motion.
Seeing no other comments or questions, I'll look to you for a motion.
Okay, that building bylaw 606, 2023, cited as Bowen Island Municipality, building bylaw number 489, 2019, amendment bylaw number 606, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time. That bylaw number 607, 2023, cited as Bowen Island Municipal Development Application Fees bylaw 484. 2019 amendment bylaw number 607, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time. And that bylaw number 610, 2023, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Subdivision and Development Servicing bylaw 447, 2017 amendment bylaw number 610, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Morse. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. And just housekeeping without objection, we will receive item 7.1A, the letter from Bowen Island Properties dated July 7th, 2023. See no objection, that carries. And item 7.2, the Metro Vancouver Regional Parks rezoning and OCP amendment, RZ/OCP 2023-0018 for camping use at Cape Roger Curtis. Back to our manager of planning.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the next update on this rezoning and OCP amendment application. And just by way of background, the last council meeting that saw these bylaws was April 24th, when council gave first reading to amendment bylaw 608 and 609. And directed staff to report back with development of a section 219 covenant outlining a phasing agreement prior to referring bylaws 608 and 609 for comment. And then following that meeting on June 14th, council held a committee of the whole. And the committee of the whole recommended council direct staff to consolidate a list of conditions discussed at the June 14th, 2023 committee of the whole meeting and report back to council at the July 10th, 2023 regular council meeting for committee and external referrals. So that's where we are here today. Additionally, at the April 24th meeting, staff advised that some items were still outstanding. So items related to transportation plans and a visitor management plan. And the Metro Vancouver and staff subsequently for a draft concept water study analysis report. And so those items have been provided and are in the agenda tonight. And just by way of illustration, this is the draft concept plan that Metro Vancouver has provided outlining how they are proposing development of the site in anticipation of their further engagement on their park proposal. Committee of the whole recommendations are included as attachment to this report, and I anticipate council discussion on them, but just by way of sort of categorizing them, I think we saw, a number of conditions or objectives of a rezoning, and they included items around management and management framework of the park. And so that included things like animal control, fire control, reservation systems of the park, as well as just overarching thinking about how the park phasing and management is envisioned. We saw conditions and objectives about the breakdown of campsites, so fewer vehicle access sites. A number of conditions about off-site transportation work, so be that contributions to the multi-use path, shuttle transportation, both on and off island, passenger ferry, alternative access. Conditions about conservation of land within the park or buffers within the park from adjacent uses, and then off-site improvements in Cove, so land to support work to mitigate impact of additional visitors. And then also in this report, staff have compiled comments provided to the municipality up to the June 26th meeting. So we've received, as of that meeting, 495 letters to this application from 333 unique submissions. We categorized 115 letters supporting the proposed overnight camping, 115 supporting, 223 opposed and 133 that didn't, opposition or support. And just for interest's sake, we've been categorizing themes identified in letters and what are the most common themes. I think it's helpful. So you can see how these tie into those conditions from council that we saw earlier. So varied capacity and fire hazard, traffic, water use, and then access as the most common themes that were identified. And then in terms of where we are in the process, so this is what I had presented in April at the time of consideration of first reading, and then we would now be at the step of council receiving additional information, referring bylaws to committees, agencies, public engagement, discuss phasing agreement, potential amendments to bylaws, any results of referrals. And then it would be sending the bylaws out for referrals, and that we are now early July, we would anticipate potentially some referrals being able to be completed in July, and many would extend into September, given what we know of our committee schedules. And then following that round of referrals, we would be reporting back to council with results of referrals before any council consideration of second reading. And then as this is an amendment to our zoning and OCP bylaws, after a second reading would require a public hearing. After the closure of a public hearing would be consideration of third reading, and then referral of the OCP amendment bylaw to the Islands Trust for approval before consideration of fourth reading and adoption of a possible bylaw. So where we are in the process, and then I have the staff recommendation, but sort of this first will be almost most critical. So council directing staff to include items identified in listed conditions approved at this meeting as conditions on the rezoning. Then it would be to refer the bylaws and technical reports and proposed conditions to, and this is actually the list that had earlier received the referral with the addition of the Heritage Commission as an additional one of our advisory committees that seemed would be valuable to be referred to the bylaws. And council required the applicant to hold a public information meeting on this application. And just one more thing that I didn't note in this presentation but did in the report is that at that April meeting, council had directed staff to come back with essentially a section 219 covenant and phasing agreement. And we have obviously not done that in this report. And one of the considerations into that was from that June committee of the whole meeting, we had conditions from that committee of the whole that were quite different, some of them, than what are seen in Metro Vancouver's submissions and bylaw to date. And so wanting clarity from council on conditions and bylaw direction on this bylaw, rather than spending the time crafting a covenant based on the April 24th submission and submission of Metro Vancouver to date. So wanting that clarity from council in terms of direction before working on what would go into that covenant. So I'll stop in there and open for any questions.
And we will start with Councillor Fast.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions to begin with. One of them is that the staff recommendation talks about the items identified in the list of conditions approved at this meeting, and it says, and included in attachment 16 to the staff report. And is that the conditions recommended by staff at the earlier meeting?
It starts with that, and essentially it's that list of that meeting. So it starts with the staff list and goes into the items identified by council.
Oh, they're in here too. Okay. Thank you. Yes, I see that. Okay, thank you. That's my main question. I was confused about that. So that's very good. Attachment 16 it's a link, isn't it? Okay. That was my question. I have one more. In the financial section of your report, would it be, well, anyway, I just think that there's, never mind. It's not a big question. Thank you.
Further questions or comments from council? Councillor Morse, followed by Councillor Getty.
Well, we had an excellent letter from John Dowler suggesting wording is not such that it's that sort of my initial comment was this doesn't seem to me the normal process. When we've done rezonings before, we've come up with a list of potential conditions or issues that need to be resolved as part of or before we get to second or third reading. And we've identified those and directing staff to discuss those with the applicant. To send a list of things, and the heading of the document says conditional requirements. It doesn't say conditions to be discussed with Metro Vancouver, for example. And you've got, if you're going to consider the requirements, there's what, 13, 20 of them, 21 of them. So do all those have to be resolved? So if one of them doesn't work, the whole deal disappears, or the whole rezoning disappears. So it's sort of like, I don't know, waving a red flag in front of a bull, the way this is presented. So I'm kind of concerned about that. In the referrals, the finance committee was in the referral round the first time round, and it doesn't seem to be in the referral round this time round. And yet there are considerable financial implications, especially to how the money might be, how the actual costs of the multi-use path would be figured out and shared. And for example, it doesn't talk about grant money. If we got grant money, is it the net that's shared, or is the grant money our half? And things like the municipal roads being divested is, to me, a very different situation than some of these other conditions. One of the conditions in here, the protection of the coastal bluffs. When I looked at the application form that was actually submitted, I'm guessing that every lot had a covenant on it. They just seemed to go on and on forever. Has anybody compared the covenants for the lots that are on the coast to see if they do have coastal bluff protection in them? I mean, let's not ask for something that's already there.
Through the chair, that they do not.
Okay. And then the other is a shuttle from urban Metro Vancouver to Horseshoe Bay. Well, there's already a perfectly good 257 express bus that goes from downtown right through. So why would we ask for something else to duplicate that and take riders? It's an articulated bus, it's a rapid bus, it's the double bus. So to me, having number 13 there it should be removed. And I still don't understand the reduction in vehicle access sites, the 10% of non-group and non-tent camping. I just don't understand that one and how it would work. Now, just going back through the staff report, you're asking them to hold another public information meeting, yet they're already talking about a whole public consultation plan. So is this in addition to the public consultation plan they're talking about?
Through the chair, what they are proposing would fit within our definition of a public information meeting.
So require the applicant to hold a public information meeting or continue with their public consultation sessions as described. It's not in addition to.
Correct. I mean, our development bylaw requires a public information meeting. What they're proposing goes beyond that, but also includes the public information meeting.
So they basically are going to meet that with their plans. I've already talked about the title on the agenda. The transportation thing, your report indicates the study looked at 4 intersections along the route. That chart below isn't supposed to be the intersections, correct?
If you check correct, that's their, I mean, the council on the roads.
Pardon?
So my report then sort of gives a synopsis of elements of their study. And so I showed the table showing that their peak roadway volumes.
Okay, so it's no connection to the 4 intersections.
Correct.
And I just don't quite understand the terminology roadway link volumes.
Through the chair, so that is looking at, essentially those lengths of roadways that are connecting Snug Cove to the proposed
Okay.
park, so along Whitesdale, along Tunstall, as links of the roadway.
Because Bowen Bay Road doesn't connect the cove, but it connects the western parts of the island.
I believe that that's their capture at the intersection of Bowen Bay Road.
Ah, okay, which is just before you head down. And then on the draft concept plan, the paragraph up above talks about, I think, 5 sub-areas. So the sub-areas are just sub-areas, they're not, as it said, the plan identifies 5 sub-areas within the proposed park, but we've got 6 numbers on the map that's down below.
Through the chair, so those numbers aren't for the sub areas, they're just for elements of highlighting the overall site plan, and then the concept plan itself goes through and looks at the 5 sub areas in more detail.
I've got to look at the concept plan. That's confusing. And you've already answered the one about the phasing context. Okay. And then you're talking about initiating the referrals through July and August, and then they continue into the fall. By initiating, that's when the meetings are going to be held, and you're going to present the report and all the stuff to the committees. Is that what you mean by?
Correct.
And yeah. You can't get all that done in the rest of what's left of this month, I guess, with that number of committees.
Yeah.
Definitely would kill us all in that process. Okay. I'm just not comfortable with the wording in the way it's worded. And, I think John Dowler made some very excellent comments about that. And then my last one is in the definition of vehicle access campsite for use by persons with accessibility challenges. Is that going to be a defined term somewhere?
See page 93, he's got a.
Right, through the chair, so you're referring to the alternative, which was looking at
I'm on page
the elements of
9 of your report.
of the conditions that could be captured in bylaw 609. I guess I'd say potentially it could be defined, but I don't know if it has to be a defined term.
Yeah, I guess, I'm just not quite sure. Accessibility challenges, that mean you have to have a handicap parking sticker or that kind of thing? Okay. I can't support this list of conditions, the way it's written, or, and, especially with the headings.
Yep. Regarding the headings for that list of conditions, that is just really a choice of terminology to get away from using amenity contributions. So with the rezoning, there's an opportunity for council to require or request amenity contributions. But in discussion with Metro and with this council, we talked about how many other member municipalities would look at the park in and of itself as being the amenity.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to get away from calling that list an amenity contribution list. And so at the time, we just come up with additional requirements. So it's absolutely easy to change what that's called. And
I think it should be something like potential conditions for discussion with Metro Vancouver.
Sure, yeah, and I agree that the comments made by John Dowler are quite good.
Councilor Wake, you
Okay. So John Dowler actually suggested the word objectives, but to look at the whole picture here, I think what we're seeing is it's going to be, we're in a back and forth with Metro saying we're going to do this, and then we say, well, we want this, and then it goes back and forth. It really calls for something that I asked about in that first committee of the whole meeting when the first presentation was made, which is we need to be able to collaborate. And they've used the word collaboration in their documents. We're going to collaborate on this and that and the other thing with Bowen Island and with First Nations. But there's no talk about how that collaboration actually happens and works. And my thought is that that's the issue we should be taking up with them, because we're never going to sort of. I have many of the same questions that Councillor Morse just asked, and how are we going to get the answer? We need people around the table, Metro staff, Bowen staff, and I would think First Nations, with some representation, to work through these things and come up with what works for everybody. That's how collaboration works. And in addition, we now have the possibility or the suggestion of considering an alternative, which would be quite a different arrangement or focus for the park, which I think is certainly worth considering. But again, where does it fit into all of this, and how do we insert it into this? So my suggestion is that rather than trying to amend bylaw at this stage, why don't we propose a collaboration? And I think it should be a staff collaboration in order to work through the myriad details that both Metro feels they have addressed through their plan and their documents, and we've raised through our conditions, which I think should be objectives.
Councillor Getty and then Councillor Fast.
There's a huge amount to digest here. And I've thought through the timeline in terms of the proposal came in, and then they completed the sale or the purchase, and then we passed first reading and we sent it off to committees, and they had some public consultation. And then at the same time that they were creating and working on and having the consultants bring up all of these other reports that we've now got, the park planning, the visitor management, and updated, we'd seen some of the emergency proposals before, but a lot of this with the new maps and the water study and some of these other things came in just after, or just before, around the same time that we're having our big committee of the whole meeting in June. So we come up with a great long list. That's the Appendix 16 in terms of things that we want to have more information about and more conversation about. And then since then, there's material that's in the community that I'm not sure that it's ever hit one of our agendas, but the freedom of information for the Metro's application for the Crown land that where Ferry Fen is located, another huge chunk of land. And with that, still, we're not making referrals to the Squamish Nation on this list of outside agencies and our own committees. And we still haven't heard anything from Metro in terms of what their negotiations or what their discussions have been with the Squamish Nation. And it seems to me that if now we're finding out, not from Metro, but through a Freedom of Information application, that they've made this application to the province for the whole of the Crown land, that's a significant First Nations interest. And I think we're missing a huge connection in terms of what is going on with that? What discussions are there, if any? And if there aren't, then that's a significant missed opportunity. And it's their application. I don't think that we're in a position of opening up that conversation, but it's got to be part of all of the discussions. What are they, if they're applying for the whole of the Crown land, that's double the acreage that they're talking about. What are they planning on doing with that? How does that fit in, if anything? I don't see that in any of the material. So it's, there's more questions than there are answers that have been raised in the material that we've received from them. The criticisms that we had earlier from the public comments in terms of the reliability and the validity of the transportation report based on that 2-day study that they did when the fiasco of the ferries being canceled, and considering that to be some sort of a snapshot is not very helpful and raises real questions of reliability. And again, it's that too fast without real consultation and valid information. So I'm very concerned in terms of wanting to get feedback from the various committees of this new information that we've got, consolidate some of our ideas, and hear what Metro, if this is our presentation to Metro of our Appendix 16 recommendations, they may have heard about it, but they haven't formally received it yet. I need to know what their reaction to our ideas are. If we've got concerns and this is what they are, then, would that spark Metro into sitting down and saying, okay, there's some valid concerns and there's some issues that we can talk through and we need to sit down, and instead of going off in this direction that they seem to be stuck on, they're not opening it up. So I would just, rather than having staff work on the bylaw without feedback from Metro to our concerns and without more feedback from our committees about these new reports from Metro, I don't think we should rush this anymore. It's the same objection that I had the first time in the first reading. I don't like playing card games without all the cards on the table.
Councillor Saunders?
I think Councillor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fast, then Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, thanks everybody for the great discussion and for the various letters and presentations from the public. And thank you, staff, for congratulations on summarizing so many existing and incoming reports and council's really broad conversation on June 29th or whenever that was, as well as the long-standing issues about the multi-use path and things like that. I'm really glad these are part of my question at the beginning was because I was confused about whether it was part or whether they were included, and they are. So that's great. And I've got concerns about nobody having apparently heard from Squamish Nation yet. Granted, and I agree with Councillor Getty that the Crown land interests, and I would say all sorts of interests in the land and the names of the points and that beautiful marine wall that goes down. I think there's potential for a marine park aspect here as well, just in terms of ecological protection of some pretty spectacular underwater stuff. So I don't want to disrespect anybody's efforts or intentions in terms of protecting ecological systems and beautiful nature that we can all love. I'm going to follow up on Councillor Wake's suggestion about collaboration. I liked Bert Painter's, and several people have written to us about process, including the recent letter today or yesterday from John Downer. And this idea of a joint vision or a joint declaration of intent or joint purpose is something that seems to be unclear. Several people, including around this table, have been asking, why those campsites? Who is the, and my question is, that might be a way to put it into our list is, let's define the target audience. Because I'm hearing different ideas about who the target audience is. And if there are people coming with vehicles and coolers and wanting to enjoy the view, then there might not be the people who need that experience the most. And there might not be the people who would get the most out of the experience in terms of the future that we want to be preparing our society for. Anyway, I won't go on and on. I'm just going to say a few things here. I think we could be an example of a delightful low carbon future with the multi-use pathway and the other things that are on this list. So I'm currently in favor of this list. I think it's good for referring out to the committees. I think this could encourage citizens to feel encouraged about densifying urban areas, to support climate actions. If they know that places like this are going to be protected, that they can escape to, and where they might see whales on their trip over, and the journey might be as much fun as staying in their campsite or walking around the park or bicycling. And I think we could adjust the design as part of the adaptive management bit, which we've been reminded of tonight in the comments. Develop the multi-use pathway first before the opening. That's in the staff comments. And I think we need a definition of the target audience. And I like staff's suggestion of redefining vehicle access campsite. So for example, I'm going to read it out here just because I'm not sure if my colleague has had a chance to find his way to page 93 of 419. Council could direct staff to amend section 22 of the draft bylaw so that vehicle access campsite doesn't mean campsites that are accessible to vehicles, but instead it means a site occupied or intended to be occupied and maintained for overnight guest sleeping accommodations for use by persons with accessibility challenges in either a single tent or two tents, which can be accessed by motor vehicles. So this puts the accessibility to the persons with accessibility challenges rather than to the vehicles. So this is what I would propose, is that change of a definition, and that we ask for a definition of the target audience we want to invite. So later on in our discussion, I will put my hand up again to make specific motions for those two definitions, which I think would help clarify it. But otherwise, I'm in, I like the idea of moving forward and getting the input from our committees. Everybody's working hard and fast, and these reports are coming in as it is to keep up with all of this. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Saunders?
Thank you. I'm pretty content to slow play this right now. We're getting information, you know, that we're kind of taking the fire hose approach here again. We suddenly have all this information came in the past 3 weeks. I really like Councillor Wake's suggestion about collaboration. We could spend literally years us sending them something and them amending a report, us going, geez, that's good, but what about the other report? We could literally spend years doing that, and I don't think that's in anybody's best interest. I would like us to propose Metro Van a staff-to-staff collaboration where people are sitting in the room. I'm comfortable that our staff are really, really fully aware of the local concerns here and would represent them really well. And including the new proposal potential as well. So I would like us to take the lead in encouraging that with Metro Van. They may say no, I would hope not, but I think that's I think that should be the next step. Before we present them with a list of anything, I think we should say, we need to sit in a room. We got to talk to you about some of the things that really concern the people that we represent. And they concern everybody on this island. And I think it's incumbent on us to try and get that process going and getting people in the room together, looking in the eye and talking about it.
Councilor Getty?
I forgot to ask the first round. There's a recommendation, a question for staff. Recommendation to refer this to the Heritage Commission. My question is, I'm assuming that that's with respect to possible archaeological sites. And the one that was identified in one of the early, I think, environmental reports came from Metro with a suggestion that there might be several more, but they hadn't been identified. But the likelihood was that there would be, because there were several sites that had been identified on the Paisleys and some of the other surrounding islands. So if it is referred to the Heritage Commission, do they have jurisdiction over archaeological sites? My recollection is that they do not.
Through the chair, I think you're referring to the archaeological impact assessment that was done as part of the subdivision of the site that identified the site on the property and did flag the need for more.
That said that there was a need for more.
The commission itself would not have that ability, but they would be able to make recommendations to council.
And secondly, with respect to the Councillor Wake and Councillor Saunders' suggestions about trying to move towards collaboration, I'm not sure that if we, simply now and requested it. My understanding is that the Metro Board has some divisions. It's not a unified situation, and that there might be some need to have some strategy in terms of how to set that up so that they're more willing to, figure out how to best approach that. There's still people out there that would think we're crazy for questioning a $40 million gift horse in the mouth. And, there's other people that might be more amenable, and, how do we think that through and set that up? Other than just at this moment in time asking them to please be nice and cooperate. I don't think that was necessary.
I don't think that's what we're asking for, though.
Okay.
Sorry.
Councilor Jurgensen?
I just want to go back to an earlier point of Councilor Morris's, I also think Councilor Fast for reading out the section that she did. To Councilor Morris's earlier point about defining persons with accessibility challenges, I do think that is something that would need to be defined. Probably as things move forward, that should be handed to the accessibility committee for input on that, because I think if you don't define that, you end up with the kind of questions that Councilor Morris had. What's that defined as? And what the municipality might define it as different than what Metro Parks may.
Thank you, Councilor Jurgensen. I'm going to jump in as a first round speaker here. So this is a question to the planner. We heard during public comments some of the potential issues around the transportation studies. I'm curious what staff's analysis is on the validity and assumptions of both the transportation impact assessment as well as the trip generation report.
To the chair, I think I would say I share some of the same concerns. You can look at the timing of the report and when my report is dated. I think I had it for a couple of days before publishing our report. And I shared some of the concerns with Metro, in particular the assumptions around the modal split of day use visitors to the park. They assumed a similar modal split as Visit Crippen Park in terms of walking and cycling and transit use. And I pointed out that essentially even just the built environment around Crippen Park supported walking trips to Crippen that is a different environment at CRC. And the transit use, potential to visit Crippen by transit is very different than CRC, at least currently. So I had trouble with those assumptions. And obviously the vehicle counts, but I'll note the vehicle counts at least seem similar. So our director of engineering presented to council the ISL average weekday trips. So it's a different stat than presented by Bunt, who presented peak hour demand, so different than average weekly. But sort of the ratios of travel on those roads seem consistent, and I'm at least satisfied that in the Bunt report, they identify that they will be doing additional traffic counts throughout the summer to provide that information. Short answer is I do share some of those same concerns. Right. And part of what I was hoping to come from this meeting is referral of the bylaw, but particularly those technical reports to the committees, knowing that like the Transportation Advisory Committee will be very interested in that report, and our Parks and Trails Committee will be interested in some of the other reports, and having that greater opportunity for committees to review and also staff to review them further. And I think that just finally knowing that some of the council conditions or objectives would alter sort of those reports. So most obviously sort of the move to lower the number of vehicle access campsites in the park would impact the traffic report and the traffic generation, especially as it relates to the campsite piece of it. And so wanting to know from council at this meeting if that's the direction council wants to go, it seems rather than have Metro revise their existing report and say, well, now you're looking at different assumptions because we're looking at changing that ratio of campsites.
Right, and then so in their initial assumption, and I want to hone in on the transportation reports in some detail because they were celebrated a little bit at the most recent Regional Parks Committee meeting for their data. And I'm curious whether, so one of the conclusions of that report, the campground would actually result in less traffic and less vehicle use than would the build out of 24 sites. And is that consistent with staff's analysis of the reports?
I think I would say the report is based on sort of like standard trip generation numbers. And so using those numbers, then it would be fewer vehicle trips than build out of 24 residential lots. Yeah, I don't know if I could add much more than that.
Yes, Mayor, I do believe that that's one of the outcomes of the report that they're trying to highlight is that from their data collection and analysis, they believe that it would generate less. So, whether that's true or not is difficult to determine.
Right.
The report, I think, is flawed in the data collection because it represents data collected on a really low volume day because of the ferry issues and low volume weekend. And that in one way, just demonstrates that the report is flawed.
Yeah.
Another way, it's like, okay, well, if you're using that as your baseline point for measuring impact going forward, well, maybe a low number is beneficial because it's easy to show impact. But if you're using to help determine like, well, what is the current environment look like? It's not great. But when we look at the ISL data, it is comparable. And I think that if you got any reputable professional in this area, they would determine that White Sails Road is a low volume rural road. And so I think that is a generally accepted determination. But the argument that the park would generate less vehicle trips than the build out of 24 lots is a bit of a subjective and a bit of a guessing game. If all 24 lots were built out, at a relatively similar period of time, then one could construe that, yes, the construction vehicle traffic associated with the build out would be significant. If you look at one building, one property development out there and the amount of traffic that generates, it's quite significant.
Right.
So if you multiply that by 24, it would be a pretty big impact. But the likelihood that all 24 are going to be built out of the same period of time is pretty low.
Right, and then the generation of ferry trips as well would be different.
Yes. Yeah.
And so the pieces about the ferry, so on page, I think it was 202 of our package, throw a couple page numbers, they were throwing around numbers that ferry growth annually was 0.4 to 0.2%. But then on page 198, I think it says that BC Ferries modeling, they use 1.2% growth year over year to the ferry capacity. But what we're seeing on the island is closer to 3% per year. So I'm curious, particularly during the summer when we're talking about, and when we look at the various graphs and the ferry impact generally, it was borne out that during peak times, the ferry is over capacity. However, the conclusions of the report often say that, well, when you look at the ferry capacity overall, there's plenty of room. So I'm curious both from a demand management perspective of, particularly Friday afternoon and Sunday afternoon when people are going to be coming, leaving the park, and then plug that in with the growth that we're going to experience just in the raw residents of the island. What is staff's analysis of the overall ferry impact, both of park as it plugs into our resident growth?
To the chair, I mean, that was a part of the report I read with interest and found challenging to almost analyze, and that it talks about, our observable ferry capacity issues, especially at peak times. The report sort of summarized that as like, well, there's lots of capacity because, the 5 a.m. ferry, the 10 p.m. ferry have rooms. So overall, there's room throughout the day. And essentially said going forward, just based on sort of, projected growth plus growth from the campsite, that there'll be further issues at peak times, especially the sort of, Friday afternoon ferries coming to Bowen. And then the report says, well, we can work to shift, we can work to shift the demand to lower peak times. But it's hard to know because the date of when sort of this report was done and when the visitor management plan was done doesn't sort of outline in detail what those strategies are. And you can sort of imagine if you have a campsite reservation system, the goal would be to move reservations in a way, and you can somehow, drive when people come. I find it somewhat challenging to think about, okay, you can book a campsite for Friday night on Bowen Island, but you have to come on the
Morning.
8 a.m. ferry in the morning, to check-in time. You have to check in by noon or you don't get your spot or something, it would have to be something like that to have it work. Or again, it's like, well, we're not booking it full on Friday night because we know the demand, so we're going to shift people to book Saturday morning slots or something like that. So it's hard because it sort of says this can happen, but it's not necessarily, those strategies aren't fully fleshed out in the visitor management plan.
Right. So then on Friday afternoon, and I believe BC Ferries has tried to manage demand through moving people off of peak hours. I think they did that on the Langdale route and the Vancouver Island route, but that demand proved to be inelastic.
My recollection, they've been able to do it through like pricing models.
Right. They try,
but even like the Duke Point, encouraging Duke Point runs or whatever else.
Right. So, so trying to move people off of that Friday boat, whether it's our residents or campers, might prove to be difficult. And the other question I had was around, I think this is in page 150 of our agenda package 19 of that transportation study, is that they quoted a figure that our ferry staging area runs 2 lanes and can hold 290 vehicles. So, which if BC Ferries officially published capacity for the Queen of Capilano is, I think it's 87 vehicles. They're saying that we can hold 3.5 sailings worth of vehicles in our staging area. Is that accurate or?
Obviously, that's not
The
accurate.
report says 800 meters of 2-lane. The 800 meters is accurate because I did measure that through BOMAP, but there's not 2 lanes and there's all the driveways.
Right, okay,
And the car capacity on BC Ferry's website is listed as 100.
right.
With the
With
addition.
okay. And then some of the other numbers in the report talk about 116 vehicles going both ways or what, which is effectively, if everybody's checking in on Friday, that's a full ferry load of loads. So my challenge with the transportation report, I think we've identified some issues around growth, around demand. There's also the modal split piece where they're projecting that 21% of people going to Cape Roger Curtis are going to walk from the ferry to Cape Roger Curtis. Another 38% are going to use public transit that doesn't exist yet out there. On top of it's 290 vehicles. And when I sit in the Regional Parks Committee meeting, and I'm encouraged to hear that we've raised those issues and some of these issues with Metro Vancouver staff already, but around the Metro Vancouver tables, the challenges with the transportation studies aren't being validated to politicians in the room by their staff, which makes it very difficult for me in those rooms to say,
290?
this isn't quite accurate. So I think, is there?
Sorry, the other concern that I raised with Metro is about the shuttle bus service.
Yeah.
So they identify sort of I think it's like a 25-person bus, shuttle bus, and then at peak times, you have 3 shuttle bus loads coming off the ferry is what they would anticipate. And so I was pointing out that, that they consistently talk about like a shuttle bus service and that to accommodate, 3 loads worth, you need 3 buses to run. Because otherwise you can do one round trip between the ferry and then you take the next round trip, but another ferry load of people are coming. So they're sort of aware of that need. If the strategy is based on the shuttle bus service meeting the ferry, it needs to be sized accordingly to be able to accommodate people in a single round trip.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of flaws with the fund report.
Yeah.
In that same paragraph where they talk about the 800 meters and accommodating 290 cars, which is absurd. It also says that the lanes are numbered 1 and 2, which they are not. And it indicates that dictates which lane loads first. And so, no, we zipper, right? Everybody knows the zipper.
Right.
So it's very clear that they don't actually understand the environment in which they're talking about.
Right, and some of the challenge that I'm identifying is that that's not making its way over into the Metro Vancouver roads, and then so as a result, I'm a bit of a leaf in the wind, saying, well, no, that's not quite accurate, and then a number of parties, including Metro Vancouver staff, are saying the report's accurate, it's fine, it's going to be less traffic, it's going to be less impact, there's plenty of ferry capacity, and it makes it very difficult to move a goalpost anywhere. And I'm not saying that that's our staff's fault at all, but I'm just feeling that there perhaps needs to be a bit more of an assertive thrust to say this is what our analysis is, this is what our challenges are, and so that it makes it to that table. Because if not, the voting members in that room aren't going to see any different. Sorry, one more question. I know that I'm dominant. I just have so many questions on this.
Yep.
The other part regarding the multi-use path, so I believe it's on page 116 or page 11 of their visitor use management plan, is that we had heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was an appetite to help fund the entire regional greenway.
Right.
And that was dangled in front of both politicians and staff, and what I read in this report is that there's only a desire to fund the multi-use path within the park. Do we know if that's a typo or has the original position been moved off of, or what's the?
Yeah, to the chair, we did receive one version of the visitor management plan that talked about funding the multi-use path. And I believe that came to an earlier council meeting, and this, yeah, as you say, to fund it in the park, we did discuss it with Metro Vancouver to say that, you know, our plans for the multi-use path at this point go from Sun Cove to the intersection of Adams and Bowen Bay Road is where we've identified for the multi-use path. There's no multi-use path within the CRC park, and we've already built and funded the portion within the park. It's not clear what it's referring to. Yeah, and essentially Metro Vancouver had said that their sort of proposal was to fund construction of safe biking to reach the multi-use path. And then they talked about the broader regional greenway strategy, which our multi-use path is part of, and how they can support that greenway strategy as part of a region-wide strategy.
Yeah, and adding to what Mr. Martin is saying, we were quite concerned with what was written in paper in the report because it felt like a significant walk back from what we'd been told. But when we did meet with Metro staff after receiving the report and we flagged that issue, there was verbal comfort and assurance that they were still willing to work with us on the entire multi-use path.
Right.
As part of the regional greenway network. We just commented that we wanted that in writing and we wanted that assurance in that.
Right.
And I think also, if I can add to that, just sort of recognition that sort of the regional greenway strategy is one piece, and then the second piece is that if a key piece of this park development is to drive, you know, cycle trips instead of vehicle trips, that, you know, the multi-use path is a key piece of that. So beyond just sort of their commitment to support the regional greenway strategy, it's like this is specific to a development that's proposed by an applicant.
So regardless of the park, we would anticipate that they'd be supportive of that multi-use path, even if the park didn't happen. And that we've been clear with them that our plans for the multi-use path never extended beyond Adams Road and Bowen Bay Road, and that the expectation would be that there'd be a stronger commitment and contribution from them, if not 100% from that point to the park.
Right. I mean, especially if 21% of people are walking there.
That's right.
Right. So, and then my very last points are just around Ms. Olson's comments around adaptive management. I talked about this at the committee of the whole meeting. The use of adaptive management in these plans is not consistent with what adaptive management actually is. And I can understand, you know, where I have concerns about that and where possibly congruent with Councillor Morris's comments where this starts to feel a little fuzzy is that I think there's a bunch more work that perhaps needs to be done on this at a staff to staff level to have them sort of understand what that means and you know, whether that's something they're even into. My concerns, being a small fish in those political rooms, is I think this is their vision. I think what's presented is their vision, and this is what they like. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite to move off that because we keep the same things back in return, despite everything that we've seen go out. So I'm not sure what collaboration looks like. I think whether it happens at staff to staff or political to political level, I'm not quite sure what the next move is. I know that if we, and this would be congruent, I think, with Councillor Morris's piece and based on what we saw at the Regional Parks meeting on July 5th, is that if we send a long list of demands I don't know how that's going to go or play. And there seemed to be a particular rankling around some of the land use swaps or changes that weren't in the park, which a couple of members were not, they were like, what's this? And I said, well, actually, we did send you a letter several months ago talking about this, and we haven't brought it up, but it's, I think the benefit will be if, I'm not sure, I think we have to make our ask and figure out what it is. And if we want to change the vision, we just need to say that. And if we want out of this project, like it, we might need to say that as well.
I think that hearing this and having had that committee of the whole meeting provides staff a little more clarity around what mayor and council's interests are in terms of the vision. Mm-hmm. And that's something that staff can take back to Metro staff. I agree, Mayor, that it's very difficult to have that collaborative engagement that I would love to have. But I also think that the Metro staff will be pretty limited in their ability to be as flexible or dynamic in terms of how much latitude they have to move on what they've presented thus far. Mm-hmm. But I think a relatively easy step for us that may move us in the direction that I'm hearing Mayor and Council wanting to go is for us to go back to Metro staff and just be really clear about, okay, these are the things we're hearing, these are the interests that we need to start to see responses on, and it's then really up to Metro staff to take that back to their elected officials, to their committee and to their table to say, if we want to pursue this further, we need to start moving in this direction. And that can, it's entirely possible for them to start to make that shift. And I think, that's probably the best way for us to initiate it is for our staff to have that conversation directly with them.
Okay, so if I'm hearing correctly, it wouldn't be out of line then to say, these are all the pieces that we've discussed, and then have a motion to refer it back to staff and have you folks talk about it to the Metro Vancouver staff, and then come back to us and see what the appetite is on the various.
Yep. And I would also recommend sticking with the original recommendation from Planner Martin about the referrals out to committee, getting all of this information. There's some really good information here for the committees to start also weighing into and bringing that back. We probably wouldn't have a fully summarized report back to council until September. But that gives a fair bit of time for committees to dig into all of the new information, come back with meaningful comments, or whatever comments they can get from it. And then for staff to also have that engagement at a staff-to-staff level. And over that period of time, some of these other ideas may start to crystallize a little bit.
Okay. Councilor Morse?
So
Councilor Patch?
if you're going to stick with the original resolution, could we please add K, Finance Advisory Committee, to the list of committees you referred to? Is that okay with everybody?
Anything can be done before the motion is read.
I want to make sure it's out there so whoever reads the motion. And then I'd really like to see that we change the name on the schedule. So can we call it draft list of potential conditions for discussion with Metro Vancouver?
Sure. Any objection to that? Seeing none, we'll call it that. Sorry, I'm going to let me air traffic control this a little bit. I saw the planner's hand go up. I'm presuming that's going to be a material response to
Yes.
Something immediate?
Through the chair, just to note that the recommendation should be to the Finance Advisory Committee, the Emergency Program Executive Committee, and the Squamish First Nations were 3 referrals from the February meeting that should be included in this referral as well, just added to that.
And accessibility.
Yeah, and accessibility.
Yeah.
Is there any committees you've left out?
Forgot them all?
Just put it in the mail, put it in the mailer and refer it to everybody on the island. Councillor Fast, and then Councillor Wake, did you have your hand up? Okay, Councillor Fast and then Councillor Wake.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just introduce another one in case it's of interest that I meant to include before, and this is just that we asked Metro Vancouver to incorporate groundwater recharge areas and methods into their concept planning, because they're in a very dry area and it's getting drier, and we want to make sure that they're not letting stormwater come off their properties to affect the Bowen Island Conservancy's nature refuge. And that they conserve water. Anyway, that's just a by-the-by one. I thought that one had been missed. Secondly, I was also going to suggest it's hard for one member of a big board like that or a big committee to defend your interests when staff aren't bringing it forward and you don't have anything in the agenda about it. So I'm wondering, I was thinking maybe a letter, but I like the idea of staff to staff. But I did wonder if we would, maybe we should request a more, a better transportation projections. Since you've already demonstrated a whole bunch of deficiencies with that one, and that could be a specific request that staff could possibly make. But otherwise, I'm wondering about what the wording should be, that council refer the items identified in the list of conditions to staff to what? Take to Metro Vancouver staff for discussion? Anyway, I'm concerned about the what would be the best language there, and that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Part of it, so just to respond material to that, part of it I think would be an asking of CAO and the planner, whether you need a direction like that or whether you can provide a technical response to, like a written technical response to the traffic or transportation impact assessment.
I think the normal process we've done in the past, when we've done some of these big ones, a whole list of things, is that we request staff to discuss the draft list of potential conditions for with Metro Vancouver, with the applicant.
Right.
And report back to
Mayor,
council.
I think in terms of the Bunt report, no problem sharing our concerns directly with Metro staff.
Right.
About the inaccuracies and flaws.
Is it possible to formally, like in writing?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Transportation Committee might come up with all of that as well.
That's true. I did ping Tyler previous to this meeting to see what his thoughts were, but I'm sure there'll be more thoughts there. And I believe we did get a bunch of feedback because that initial trip generation report came right before a transportation advisory.
I think it's pretty clear just from a few statements within the report that there's numerous inaccuracies, so we can simply just point to a couple and say, based on these inaccuracies, the report in and of itself is difficult to accept.
Okay. So it sounds like we can leave staff to do that part without a specific motion. So I'll look for Councillor Saunders.
Sorry, we can leave staff only on the
button,
thing or on the larger questions.
On the larger questions, I believe that we're going to have a motion that refers these pieces out to committees.
Right. All right, I'll make them.
All right, Councillor Morris, go ahead.
The council directs staff to include the items identified in the draft list of potential conditions approved at this meeting and included in attachment 16 to the staff report dated June 29th, 2023, period. And that council refer, The council directs staff to include the items identified in the list of draft list of conditions approved at this potential conditions approved at this meeting and included in attachment 16 to the staff report dated June 29th for discussion with Metro, the applicant. And that's council refer bylaw number 608, 2023, bylaw number 609, 2023, and the associated technical reports and proposed conditions to the Advisory Planning Commission, the Community Economic Development Commission, the Environmental and Climate Action Advisory Committee, the Heritage Commission, the Housing Advisory Committee, the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee, the Transportation Advisory Committee, the Bowen Island Conservancy, the Islands Trust, Vancouver Coastal Health, the Finance Advisory Committee, the Emergency Program Executive Committee, the Accessibility Committee, and the Squamish Nation.
It's been moved, seconded by Councillor Jurgensen.
Can we have that first paragraph read back to me, please?
Yep, I'll look for the corporate
You
officer.
might have to tidy it up a bit.
That council directs staff to include the items identified in the draft list of potential conditions approved at this meeting, included in attachment 16 to the staff report dated June 29th, 2023, with the applicant Metro Vancouver.
And discuss with the applicant.
Okay.
I think the sentence doesn't quite read right. Is it? Right at
How
the end.
about that council directs staff to discuss the items identified in the draft list?
Oh, I like that even better.
Can I ask a question? That council require the applicant to hold a public information meeting left off on purpose?
Yeah, they're doing the public consultation.
Okay, so one last time, let's hear that first paragraph as amended.
That council directs staff to discuss the items identified in the draft list of potential conditions approved at this meeting, included in attachment 16 to the staff report dated June 29th, 2023, with the applicant Metro Vancouver.
Okay, since it was moved and seconded previously, any objection to that new reading? Seeing none, it's Councillor Lake.
I think we need to split this into two motions. One dealing with discussing with Metro and one dealing with referring to our committees. Because I'm all for referring to the committees and the community as a whole. We really need to hear back. But I think our resolution as to what we do with Metro around collaboration, because I'm hearing, I mean, maybe it's not going to work, but I think it's better than going with a more of a confrontational approach. And I think our staff completely understand, all these issues that we raised tonight, and there's like a lot of them. And I think the best way, before we get the board or the Parks Committee involved, let's see what our staff can work out with their staff.
Well, that's what the applicant staff, that's what refer to the applicant means. It'll be the applicant staff, it won't be the board.
So I'm going to pump the brakes on this. So we'll sever the two clauses, right? So we've got the second clause now that is dealing with the referral to committees. And then the first clause,
We just separated it into two motions.
yeah, we severed it into two motions. So is there an amendment then, I'm going to finish with Councillor Wade first, is there an amendment then to how you would like that first clause to read?
Yes, I'd just like it to be more robust. I've written something out here. It's, why don't we deal with the referral to the committees first? Because I think that'll go fine, and then we can talk about this one.
I'm going to go to Councillor Fast, and then we'll.
It might be related, but do we have to, at this meeting, approve the list? Because that's what it says in the motion. Conditions approved at this meeting, so should we do that first? Approve.
We shouldn't have approved in there. Draft list of conditions.
It's draft. Yeah, okay, then the word approved.
All right, this is gonna get messy, so let's do this. All in favor of the motion that council refer bylaw number 608, 2023, and number 609, 2023, and associated technical reports to, and proposed conditions to the committees as named in the motion? I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously. So we do have a motion on the floor as originally read by Councillor Morris. So let's go back. And how does the motion stand now?
So as read, it was that council directs staff to include the items identified in the draft list of potential conditions approved at this meeting.
You changed it. We had to discuss instead of to include.
Yeah, that's what I did. Approved at this meeting, included in attachment 16 to the staff report dated June 29th, 2023 with the applicant Metro Vancouver.
Right, and Councillor Wake, you wanted to amend that to read.
So this is a stream of consciousness. It's messy, but I think I just want to get the word collaborative in there. So my motion was to direct staff to request a meeting with Metro staff to explore a collaborative approach whereby BIM staff, Metro staff, and Squamish Nation staff meet together around one table to share aspirations, concerns, and perspectives on the extensive list of issues raised in the materials presented in Planner Martin's report, the July 10th council meeting, Bowen Island Council. So take this whole thing and give it to staff.
That's beautifully framed. Is there a seconder to replace the original motion with that language? Seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. So maybe we'll just be at ease here for a second while Councillor Wake and
Already.
all right, so we're back. So Getty, I see the proposed amended motion by Councillor Wake.
That was direct staff to request a meeting with Metro staff to explore a collaborative approach whereby BIM staff and Metro staff and Squamish Nation staff meet together around one table to share aspirations, concerns, perspectives on the extensive list of issues raised in the materials presented in Planner Martin's report at the July 10th meeting of Bowen Island Council.
Okay, and then over to Councillor Getty and Councillor Morse.
It seems to me it's built into that, an assumption that Squamish Nation have time and energy and staff that can work on this. And I don't know that we haven't heard anything from Metro in their discussions, whether or not they've been able to set anything up, or ourselves in terms of whether we've had any feedback from them. And I mean, the news will tell you that they're heavily involved in some major projects in Vancouver. And they may not have this on their work list at all. So the expectation we need and we want, but we're not going to be able to force or
So
demand
maybe-
or
Maybe different language,
involve
like,
them. We do need to involve them somehow. So, if that's going to be one of our major stumbling blocks, so be it. But, in terms of expecting them to be sitting around a table with us and meeting with us to try and work this through, I think that's unreasonable, unfair, and unrealistic.
we could use the word invite,
If possible.
or if possible, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not, if they don't want to, or they can't, fine. I want them to.
We have to find a way around that limitation.
Can you read that little note?
That's-
I was going to make the same comment.
So you direct staff to invite a meeting with Metro staff to explore.
No, that part's okay. It's where the Squamish Nation is included.
So to explore a collaborative approach whereby BIM staff, Metro staff, and Squamish Nation staff are invited.
Then it sounds like they're all invited.
Well, they are.
Well, I mean, Metro, yeah.
But they're Metro's the applicant, and so they would engage. And my other question was, do we want to include Alan's concept in this list of things to discuss?
Well, it's an issue that was raised at this meeting.
Okay, what did you?
Yeah, I said, okay, it wasn't in the report, but absolutely it should be in there. It was,
If it says.
again, as long as staff understands all the things, we don't have to put everything in this motion. As long.
Staff to request. Do they have to request a meeting with Metro staff? I mean, just to meet with Metro staff?
The whole idea is to meet with Metro staff first to explore this approach.
So what about a wordsmith in here? Direct staff to request a meeting with Metro staff to explore collaborative approach whereby BIM staff / Metro staff and, comma, if available, comma, Squamish Nation staff.
Great.
Meet together around one table to share aspirations, concerns, and perspectives on the extensive list of issues raised in the materials presented in Planner Martin's report at the July 10th meeting of Bone Island Council.
And the delegation. Or we just say the list of issues raised in the materials presented at the July 10th meeting of Bone Island Council, which would include Planner Martin's report and the delegation and the public comment.
That's great. So any objection to the language of if available? Seeing none, so that amendment carries.
A comma rather than a slash between aspirations and concerns. And maybe we should do the same between BIM staff and Metro staff.
Okay.
Shouldn't that first one say whereby BIM and Metro staff, and if available, Squamish Nation staff?
Technically, if you want to be formal, they should both say Metro Vancouver staff.
Yes.
Again, in the first line. All right, so we just made a couple of other amendments. So the as newly wordsmithed, direct staff to request a meeting with Metro Vancouver staff to explore a collaborative approach whereby BIM and Metro Vancouver staff, and if available, Squamish Nation staff meet together around one table to share aspirations, concerns, and perspectives on the extensive list of issues raised in the materials presented at the July 10th meeting of Bowen Island Council. Any objection to that wording? Seeing none, that is now the main motion as amended. Any discussion on? It was Councillor Jurgensen originally.
Okay.
Yep.
CWAJ is at the top.
All right.
And then we did the small wordsmithing pieces by unanimous consent. So, any discussion on this motion as it's newly read? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. Right, thank you, Council.
When's your vacation plans?
Yeah, so it should be noted the Metro Vancouver Parks, Regional Parks Committee won't meet again until the fall. There's a July meeting. There'll be a board meeting at the end of this month, but then there's no meetings again until the fall. So I think that gives us a little bit of breathing room for staff to work these pieces out. Back to our agenda. Let me get oriented here. You're on item 8.1, the staff reports, the June budget updates. I'll hand it over to our CFO, Kristen Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair, providing a budget update as of June 30th to council. Just a report to give you an update on how the property tax collection process went this year, as well as a bit of a financial update. We're at the mid-year period. So I'm going to report, I'm really pleased with the property tax collection process this year. It was really smooth and efficient. More and more people are paying online, which really is an efficient way for us to receive funds. There's less handling of cash, so there's less time spent in counting it and reconciling it and then taking it to the bank. People are paying with fewer and fewer checks, so we don't have as many NSF check reversals, which are very inefficient and then results in additional fees. So just that whole shift of people paying online is just such a positive, I think, all around. So just having a look at property tax collection statistics over the last 5 years, it's very evident to me that the rate that is established for the late payment penalty really impacts the collections rate on the due date. Back in 2019, council had adopted a bylaw which was a lower percentage penalty. There is a mandated provincial 10% late payment penalty on non-payment of taxes on the due date. A council may choose to adopt an alternative penalty bylaw if they wish. And in 2019, there was one in place. And at that time, you can see that collections on the due date were down around 85%. With the reinstatement of the penalty to the provincially mandated 10%, they have increased to 93% this year payment on the due date. So it's important for us from a cash flow perspective. It's important for us, especially given the increase in interest rates. It is positive for us because more cash in the bank means more investment revenue for us. So that is all around, I think, a really positive thing. Looking at the deferment program, there are two options for people, property owners, to access a deferment program. One is for people over the age of 55. Anybody over the age of 55 who lives in the home, they can access the regular deferral program. And then anybody with children under 18 or children over 18 that are in post-secondary school that are supported, people who fall into that category can also access a families with children program. And then by the time their kids tend to get to that age, they tend to fall into the regular program at that point. So most people barring the fact that those people with under 55 with no kids, most people have access to one of the deferral programs if they choose to use it. So this year, there were 268 applicants to the deferral program, which represents about a little over 12, almost 13% of our taxpayers. The total amount of deferrals is expected to be just over 1.5 million. Now, we do receive that money. The province actually will forward those funds to us. So it's not like we go with that. I hear that a lot from people at the counter. They say, oh, I don't want to use the program because I want to make sure you guys get the money. That is, we're always very clear that we get the money from the province, and we don't go without. If you're considering using the deferral program, and you think it's a good idea for you, we absolutely support you in your application. So I don't think from the numbers it seems to me that the trend year over year is sticking around 10%. It seems to be more people at the higher end of the tax income are accessing the program. At the higher end of values are accessing the program. Before I go on, did anybody have any questions for me about either tax collection or deferment program?
Councillor Jurgensen?
Through the chair, what is the deferral program? Like, what does it allow a citizen who qualifies to do?
Yes, so it is a property tax deferral program, meaning providing you own the property, that you live in the property as your full-time resident, that you can establish actually a loan between yourself and the provincial government. They put a charge on title. You don't have to repay that as long as you own or live in the home and it's not until such time that the property is sold or it changes hands, it changes title, at which time the loan will get repaid to the province. Okay. And they will then receive that money over time. The interest rate is quite preferable. It's there's two different rates for each of the programs, but I know the regular one is 1% below prime. So it does float with it's a variable rate, but it is quite a preferential rate.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at the revenue collections for the year, I would say that we're looking very much as expected, as anticipated. I did have quite detailed sort of explanation of most of the variances. The biggest one that we really need to focus on, of course, is still the 1.6 million that we has not so far materialized in our donation revenue related to the community center. So I suspect that we will be working over the course of the rest of the summer to really come up with a plan with our fundraising coordinators to just see what we can manage to fundraise throughout the balance of the summer. But come the fall, after the summer break, after UBCM, I believe it's at that point where we're going to have to come and really come up with a plan for the final push to raise the $1.6 million. We do have about 2.2 million from the Growing Communities Fund that council has not allocated towards anything. That could certainly be part of the discussion. But once we hear back what the final fundraising total is from the fundraising coordinators, we'll be looking at developing a final plan to finish construction for the fall as the building is expected to complete. As far as expenses go at this point, we're very much in line. The expenditure pattern is very typical. We don't actually adopt our budget till kind of late spring, and that's when the tenders start to go out, and that's when the bulk of the summer work and the things that are non-staff related, they tend to start being spent. Those budgets tend to start being spent. So
at this point in the year, it's still quite early to project where we're going to land at December 31st. But as far as, just making those high-level calculations and projections as to where we'll end up at December 31st, the spending pattern looks very predictable and typical, and there's nothing at this point in the year that is I'm concerned about that is going to push us over in any of the particular categories. So I'm just trying to we did have in our budget, we had a proposed 100,000 use of accumulated surplus. And that was kind of a holdover from the sewer treatment plant project. But it looks as though that project is pretty much wound up. And we did not end up needing to access that at this point. So it looks to me at this point that is going to be a savings, and we will not have to access that use of surplus, which I'm very pleased about. So at this point in the year, it is going to change. I mean, we're only halfway through the year and things can happen. But at this point in the year, we're on track for a surplus of about $200,000, which is about 2.7% of our operating budget. So that is a comfortable place to be. We do, although we don't budget for a surplus each year, we do hope that we have one at the end of each year, because that's what adds to our accumulated surplus over time. And our accumulated surplus is our contingency fund. It's our working capital. It gets us through the first 6 months of the year where we don't have the tax revenue, and it allows us to plan for and respond to any one-time unexpected emergency expenses. So we currently have about 1.3 million. So if we were to end the year with about 200,000 in surplus, that would put us at about 1.5 million in surplus. And hopefully that trend will continue over the next few years to get us to a level of surplus that is kind of a comfort level based on our overall budget. With our capital projects, as you know, the Director of Engineering was here earlier. We have some large projects that are just out for RFP and contracts being awarded at this point. So the summer work is just on its way to start the rollout. The community center project is going along. I mean, at this point, I would have expected additional expenditure. I would have expected that we're a bit further along. So it looks like they are still working to catch up, but I know that they still are committed to finishing at the date that they had committed to, and are working diligently to make up that lost time. These expenditures are only as of May 31st, because of course that progress draw for June hasn't been received yet. So they are obviously quite a bit under than what we'd expect at June 30th. I think that's it. I just wanted to provide this bit of information to you, give you some comfort and assurance that we are on track with our operations and capital projects to date, and just provide this for information of council. I'm not asking for recommendations other than receipt of the information, and I'm available for questions or further clarification on anything that was included in the report.
Thank you very much. Councilor Morris?
I have to have a question. I just noticed under the federal grants, there was the budget. We budgeted for $4,500 of youth summer job grants.
Yeah.
That will not, so did we not apply, or?
We applied for two, that one. That was it?
Yep.
Thank you. That was a very helpful report. I loved reading it. I appreciate getting that information. So I'll look for a motion to receive the report. Moved by Councilor Wake, seconded by Councilor Getty. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously.
Is it you?
It is Daniel, however. Yeah, no.
Yeah, let's do it.
What's that?
Let's do my other one.
You want to do your other one? 8.4, so what I was actually going to suggest for these next couple items, they seem pretty straightforward. They were in the agenda package. So what we'll do for all of them, is we'll just look to council if you have questions of the staff members on, and we'll do it in order. So we'll look at the Housing Accelerator Fund application on 8.2. Are there any questions on this before we have a recommendation as to whether to submit that application?
It's a very complex application. I had fun trying to follow all the numbers, but they worked.
Well done. It's not how I'd say fun.
All right. So I'll look for a motion that council approve the attached housing initiatives and direct staff to submit the attached application to the Housing Accelerator Fund.
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Fast, but Councillor Morris gets in there quickly with a second. Any discussion on this item or on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Item 8.3, implementation of the BC Energy Step Code. We do have our Manager of Environment and Parks Planning here. Are there any questions regarding the report? Councillor Morris.
I'm not sure if I'm reading this report right. The province is going to implement this anyhow in 2030?
Yes.
And so why do we want to do it earlier? And I'm not quite sure what, I tried to figure out what step 4 and step 5 entail, but other than people putting in heat pumps and electric furnaces, I wasn't quite sure. And tightening up their building envelope, you know, is it a lot more work for the contractors? I mean, I'm not keen on doing this. I'd rather we had maybe an initial meeting with the contractors and find out what the implications are to them. It didn't seem like we were going to get much of a bang for our time. And we've got lots of other things to do.
So through the chair, I think that step 4, doing that first kind of gives us a slower process to get to that zero carbon buildings by 2030. It enables us to perhaps provide more training to contractors and to the building industry to, make it a slower process. Hopefully we can apply for some grant funding to be able to provide that training. Each step, it goes up. I think it said, is it 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, but then you have this big jump to 100%. And mostly all it is building envelope improvements. So things like more insulation, better windows, better doors. Step 4 is a much more complicated step in terms of integrating the building design and different building materials. And it is more difficult to achieve. So I think that that's why we're taking those steps, because it provides a pathway to get to the zero carbon buildings, which you're going to have to do anyways. So you're kind of getting used to it with step 4 is kind of the idea.
But if the province is going to do it anyhow, then aren't they going to, or in the building industry itself, going to provide the training and everything? So rather than us spending time applying for grants and getting the training organized for them. I guess I'd rather than us directing you to implement the strategy at this point, I'd rather have a direction to staff to have a meeting with the construction industry about moving forward to an earlier adoption of step 4 than what the province is proposing.
Perhaps that could be part of the strategy.
Well, but we're developing an implementation strategy. And reading the report, it's so we can do it earlier than the provincial mandated. You're going to take it that we're doing this and now you're going to consult with us.
I'm going to go to Councillor Fast and Councillor Giddy.
Thank you. I'll note that this is part of our community energy and emissions plan, and it's a climate action that we have been working towards. This is another step towards the big step code. Part of the thinking, I believe, that was behind it is that we didn't want our construction industry, the folks that work in those fields or hope to work in those fields and want to be increasing their work in those fields, to be left behind, because city firms can get that training easily and send their folks over here. So we didn't want our local economy to be disadvantaged in that way by not being competitive or not having the Bowen Island peer groups and local kind of non-urban factors in their thinking. And I also, so I'm in support of this, and I think perhaps maybe Carly, excuse me, Manager Skuse, you can tell us about how the previous training and workshops and things have been taken up. Did you think they were effective?
The chair, yes, I believe so. I think most of the work was done with the building inspector. Greg could answer that a little bit better than I could, but as far as I know, there was not really any pushback on steps 1 and 3. They were already implemented in North Vancouver and in West Vancouver before we did them. And at this point, those steps since 2020, I think step 1 has been mandated by the province. So every community in BC is at step 1 now. I think that, I think that as part of the implementation strategy, we could certainly have a meeting with people in the industry and you know, that could be part of determining whether or not 2025 is the appropriate date. And we can present different options to council when we come back in November for other dates and present the findings from that meeting with those contractors.
Councilor Getty?
Well, this recommendation is basically directing staff to add to the workload, their work plan, the implementation strategy. And report back in November. Is that correct? Since it's simple. Okay. So, I mean, then staff can keep a track of whether or not the province is doing anything and whether or not they can, you know, upload or download or parts of the strategy.
Right.
Okay.
Councilor Fast?
I'd like to make the motion.
Great.
That council directs staff to develop an implementation strategy for adoption of higher steps of the BC Energy Step Code and report back to the November 13th, 2023 regular council meeting.
Seconded by Councilor Wake. Any discussion? Councilor Morse?
It's very clear in the report that we're planning on doing this by January 1, 2025. So on that basis, what I said was I'm going to be voting against this on the basis that I think the first step should be consultation with the building industry. I can't see how adding extra insulation is going to reduce greenhouse gases. So it's, I think there's more discussion needed to be had with contractors before. And I've heard a lot about the various contractor associations upping their training and doing it so that it can be done on weekends or online and things like that. So I'm not sure that we need to provide the training.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay. Councillor Saunders, Councillor Davis, in opposition, but the motion carries. Item 8.4, so this one is in our staff report. And the request here is that council proceed with a call for proposals from interested parties for the use of space at 432 Carnita Road, Bowen Island, which is the caring circle as they move into the health center. Any questions for the CFO, Councillor Morse?
I'm just wanting to clarify, you're only talking about the space that the caring circle is moving out of.
Right.
Because that's not clear in the resolution. So I think I would like to suggest that the council proceed we amend the resolution to say that council proceed with a call for proposals for interested parties for the use of the space being vacated by the Caring Circle at 432 Gardena Road.
Exactly, so would you like to make that motion?
So I will move that council proceed with a call for proposals from interested parties for the use of the space being vacated by the Caring Circle at 432 Gardena Road.
Moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion?
Yes,
Councillor Fast.
sorry, I was actually putting up my hand. I'm happy to say this is fine. I'm wondering if, when you receive these RFPs, do you, and I see people are writing you letters already, do you plan to use the collaborative projects policy as sort of a policy to rely on? Because it has, yeah.
Certainly it would be a guiding principle.
Good, because I was gonna suggest when you put out the call for proposals, if you put a link to that in there, then it'll give groups that haven't ever done this kind of thing before, a good framework, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Getty.
Of the physical limitations of that building, as much as I'm a friend and supporter of the Friends of the Library, I'm quite concerned about the weight of the books that might be in there. So I think that whoever applies, there might be some other considerations. I'm not sure who you would contact to get an opinion, but.
Any further discussion?
I'm just looking at it again, sorry. Would it be better to say expressions of interest rather than proposals?
Yeah.
At this point, they can come forward with an idea and then maybe some of them won't fly at all and they don't have to put it all. So I move an amendment that council proceed with a call for expressions of interest. So delete proposals and replace it with expressions of interest.
Okay. Any objection to that, the change of that wording? Seeing none, that carries by unanimous consent. And back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you. And then item 8.5, our CAO update.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor had requested update on the Public Works Yard temporary staff facility. So the trailer was ordered in April and was expected to be delivered about the third week of August. The site's been prepared for the trailer, so the site where the trailer is going to go has been cleared, and the items that were there have been moved. Tie into both the septic and the water and electrical will be completed when the trailer is actually on site. The water and septic will be, the water will be done by our own staff, and the electrical and septic will be done by local contractors. Multi-use path, continued work on the phase between Artisan Lane and Charlie's Lane is ongoing. The community center, almost all of the windows are in, and there's still some exterior envelope work that needs to be completed before doors would go in, and doors will go in quite a bit later for ease of access for constructors. But so until those doors are able to go in, then the final membrane won't be complete, but it's virtually complete. Right now, there's a focus on trenching for the sewer towards the going to get that work done, which will, and there's also some additional infrastructure trenching for like propane and some other utilities for the facility. And for any council member who has not yet had a site visit but would like one, please just reach out to me anytime. We can organize that. We are hosting a special on-site event for a donor event coming up the 15th of July. Wastewater treatment plant, phase one has been completed. We had a meeting on Friday with the consulting engineers to review capacity to determine if there's any additional connections that can be made. We anticipate results from that analysis within about 4 weeks. And for the Cove Bay Drinking Water Treatment Plant, commissioning is still underway. We're still working through some technical bugs. I know it feels like this is the never-ending project, but I'm really hopeful that we're going to be able to get past this latest technical glitch. For the Eagle Cliff Drinking Water Project, we're still waiting for funding updates, and so there's not been much progress on that front. The Blue Water Park Drinking Water Project is we're initiating the detailed design work. And that's it for my update.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the CEO? So none, we'll move on to item 11, which is new business. 11.1, the meetings that I've attended over the last 2 weeks are there. Most notably, regional parks. We did see Ms. Hayakawa present at the Regional Parks Committee meeting, which was great to see her there. And then everything else is in the minutes, so unless there's any questions. Seeing none, all right. 11.2, I was unable to make it to the Mayor's Council meeting as I was away, so Councillor Morse attended. Did you have any?
A couple of things. It was a very interesting discussion about the conversion to electric battery operated buses. And as a result of the bus operating battery powered, they take longer to charge. And therefore the bus capacity, the bus fleet has to increase by about 15% in order to have the same level of service as there is with the diesel buses. So that then leads to needing more expansion in the various bus depots. So there was quite a bit of discussion about that. And then the other major discussion was on update for free transit for teens. There's a lot of people that have been pushing for free transit from 13 to 18. And I don't think there was anybody in the room that was against the concept, except for where's the money going to come from to offset the fare revenue, and it should be more of a provincial program, not just a TransLink program. It should, BC Transit and provincial rather than all in one. So that was an interesting discussion. And then there's been discussions about rejigging for a long time, changes in the governance structure. And so it was agreed through, and that's been being discussed with the minister for quite a while. So the agreement was to set up 3 new committees, joint committees with the Mayor's Council, with the TransLink Board and the Mayor's Council members. And each would have their own matching committee, but those committees would meet jointly. So it was 3 committees. Here, where we go. So an executive compensation committee, a joint finance, joint planning, and joint executive compensation and director recruitment committee. So 3 joint committees of the board members, and then they would each report back to their respective boards. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. We did meet as a small municipalities caucus for the first time, which was great. My points in that meeting, as we raised issues around being small municipalities, I raised our increasing transit options, which have increased significantly since in the last 8 years. I think we've gone from about $530,000 to 900 plus would be what we saw in the last collection. So they were surprised to hear that. So we're talking about commensurate service increases, perhaps. The other point that I did float was the allocation of the Canada Community Building Fund. Which I was told a little bit that I was barking up the wrong tree and I should go talk to somebody else about that, but I did put it in the water there. And it was received well by the other mayors, but I'm not sure the translator itself has appetite to deal with it.
When we had that originally,
Yeah.
it was 100% to translate. We managed to get part of it removed the last time around.
Yeah.
It's not
It's been like, we tried hard, but
Yeah, so it's not translating decision, so,
yeah.
you know, I don't know if we'll have lobbying allies there, but.
Right. Right.
Right. So, and that's it for translating. So 11.3, Islands Trust business, I'll look to our Islands trustees.
Go ahead. We spent a 3-day Trust Council quarterly meeting on Gabriola, early June, and we spent the bulk of that starting the process for the strategic plan. So a year ago is when the governance review was tabled, the report, and one of the main recommendations was for the trust to have a proper or more traditional strategic plan. So subcommittee of the Finance Advisory Committee has been working on, and they were people that were involved in industry and are familiar with the concepts and the different patterns. And so they've been setting up models for us to look at and to consider. One of the first steps is to do a SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's what happened Thursday, I guess most of Wednesday, and some wrap up after that. So that is going to come back to the Finance Advisory Committee, subcommittee that's working on the strategic plan. It's also going to come back to the Governance Committee, which is the one that I'm working with in terms of adding to that, reflecting on it, seeing whether or not how we want that to into a proposal or summary for the next quarterly meeting in September. So whole lot of that. It was a very, very interesting process in terms of getting everybody. Not everybody attended. It was not as well attended there. You know, it was the long holiday weekend coming up, so people didn't really want to travel from far off islands and get stuck on ferries and whatever. So there was a bit of a problem that way. But the people that were there, maybe 3/4 of the group, did work, took it seriously, and got quite a good list going in terms of the second part of it was how do we apply the strengths to the opportunities, and how do we apply the strengths to some of the weaknesses, and combining those 4 different elements together to do an analysis. So we've got a really good start on that, and we're going to be working on that. The Governance Committee meets again on July the 31st, so that's when we'll next get a stab at it.
And I'll just add a couple of things. Thank you. And the kind of planning that we're moving towards is what they call a corporate plan. I think it'll be better rather than a new incoming trust council stopping all the work and going off in a completely different direction or something like that. This will be better able to link it to objectives, and I think it'll be more, we'll be able to get more done. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that. We also voted to continue doing the strategic projects that are already underway. So in September, there should be a webinar about groundwater recharge areas and freshwater sustainability for all the islands, including some mapping. And we can ask Islands Trust about that tomorrow in our meeting at 9:30, when Trust Area Services were joining them online. There was a really good example of an OCP that had been updated with a number of other plans and First Nations input. So we had a good presentation about the Nanaimo City Plan and how they had worked with their First Nations neighbors to come up with something together. And also not to exhaust everybody with updating a whole bunch of plans simultaneously. And so that was very interesting. And I just put it out there as a different way to update an official community plan. And yeah, I came out of it. I rode my bicycle there and back, and and it was a good, fast way to get there. Actually got home for $0 because now I'm 65. Anyway, that's my report. It's hard to make a lot of progress quickly in 4 meetings a year. So that's why we're just getting going on the strategic planning now. It's been a lot of spirited discussion about direction.
Thank you, trustees.
I have a question.
Councillor Morse.
I noticed in reading the financial reports that they were signed by Nancy Brothers. So is Julia Hobbs no longer the Director of Admin and Finance Officer?
Very much involved.
Yeah, Trust Council voted to follow some of the recommendations in the governance.
No, I'm asking if Nancy.
And they are also bringing on new people, and Julia had been on leave, and now Julia's back.
Okay, so Nancy had prepared those reports, but Julia.
Julia's still there, yep.
Okay. So moving on to question periods. A question period is an opportunity for members of the public to request clarification or ask a follow-up question relating to anything discussed at the meeting. Do you have any questions from the public?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So what I will have you come up to the front here and have a seat.
Got 2 quick questions.
No, that's absolutely fine, but come on up and join us in the front just so everybody can hear you. And if you can state your name and then ask your questions.
Blythe Hilly, and I'm president of Seniors Keeping Young, Bowen Island, Skye. And my 2 questions are of process. One is, will the criteria for whomever is going to be the tenant for the caring circle be published, the selection for the tenant? And the other question is, I believe we're already on the agenda for July the 24th. And I am wondering if we are able to do a PowerPoint presentation.
Sure, so let's, we can deal with those questions in reverse order. So I'll look to our corporate officer to answer the PowerPoint question.
Yes, you're certainly welcome to just send a.
Can I ask an ancillary question? How long would we be able to have?
We have you down as a delegation, so usually it's 10 to 15 minutes. So I would budget for 10 minutes and 5 for our questions.
Okay, that's the max. Okay, thank you.
And then to the first question regarding the criteria for the expression of interest, I'll look to our CFO who had that on the agenda.
Yeah, in our expression of interest that gets published in the undercurrent, we'll just give a list of the criteria that we're looking for. And they're gonna be things like what is the community that's served, and also, is there any way that this space could potentially be shared, or we'll come up with something that's very broad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you very much for your question. Any other questions this evening? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Anyone want to drag this out at all? Councillor Saunders?
I got a question.
I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. The on time.
Rest of the 100.